Just a couple of housekeeping matters before we start. Fire alarms, if there's a continuous alarm, please head out the doors and back towards reception, congregate outside the Great Hall. There are toilet facilities just along the corridor. There is an infrared hearing loop in this room. If you need it, please get a neck loop, or if you use a hearing aid, you can switch into it. Both are available from reception. Please silence your mobile phones. Press and members of the public are permitted to film and broadcast the public sessions of this meeting, and by being here, you do consent to be filmed or recorded. Filming, however, is only permitted in this room while the meeting is taking place, and if I should adjourn the meeting, then any filming will need to cease. And filming is not permitted elsewhere in this building. So item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence, and I have two. I have Martin Pepper from Gosport Borough Council and Karen Lucioni from Isle of Wight, and Ian Ward is deputising. Welcome, Ian. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest that they wish to make on any item on this agenda? Nothing? I might point out, obviously there is the item on appointment of independent members. I don't know, Shirley, if that might involve you.
Yes, I did wonder if I should declare an interest, so yes, I declare an interest, Chair.
Okay, it is a matter for you, but I just thought I'd mention it. Okay, that's item 2. So now we move to item 3, which is the minutes of the previous meeting, 21st of July. Would members agree, members that were present agree I can sign those as a correct record? Yes, no, yes, okay, thank you very much. Item 4, questions and deputations, there are none. Item 5 is Chairman's announcements. Thank you to Chief Constable Scott Chilton for attending this meeting. We look forward to hearing from Scott under item 7. One of the independent co-opted members on the panel, Dave Stewart, tendered his resignation in August, and you'll note that we do have an item on the agenda to initiate a process to replace Dave due to that vacancy. And on behalf of the panel, I would like to have it minuted that we record our thanks to Dave Stewart for his contribution to the work of the panel over a number of years. And then finally, a training session for panel members was held on Monday of this week, and that was aimed as an induction, particularly for new members who joined the panel in July. And I'd like to thank the Police and Crime Commissioner and her officers for supporting the event and helping brief members. And I know from talking to people that members did find that session beneficial, and the slides have now been circulated to everybody along with the links for information. And you will note that there's an item on our agenda today which proposes a continuation of a briefing and training programme for the whole panel to cover a wider range of relevant topics across the year, and we'll be able to discuss that when we get to that item. Next is item 6, which is Police and Crime Commissioner's announcements, and I'd like to invite Donna to join us and give us her announcements. And then there will be an opportunity for any points of clarification that members might like to ask. And if there are any, please address them through me. Yeah, Jason, welcome as well.
Chair, just because I like to sound like a broken record, I have asked lots of times for Donna's announcements to be sent to us because she does speak very fast and gets lots of information that we then struggle to ask questions. We haven't got that this.
Yes, we have. It's arrived recently by email, PCC announcements, so you might be able to spot
Arrived
it
when?
on your computer. This morning from Marie.
So this morning, whilst I'm travelling in, gives me no time to actually read it, to be able to make notes. This isn't aimed at you, Donna. This is to make my job easier. And I think, Chair, you held a training session on Monday, which I couldn't attend, to make our jobs here easier, to know what we're supposed to be doing. And I think it's really ironic that this panel have asked and asked and asked for that to make our jobs easier. And it's the one thing that we continuously don't get.
Okay, well, I assure you, you will, and we will all receive it in the future. Marie, as you know, has just joined us as our democratic support officer, and I did advise her just minutes ago, actually, that it did need sending. She now knows it will always be sent now, but it has been sent around. Okay. Commissioner, over to you.
Good morning, Chair. Nice to see the panel and nice to meet Marie as well today at the panel for her first meeting. Hello. So I'm going to take you through the updates from my office and the work that we have been doing at the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner throughout July, August, September and the first half of October until we arrive at today's date. It is very much in real time as well, including some things that I've done in the last literally 72 hours. So the first thing I've done is working with a number of you, and I'd like to say thank you to district and borough councils across the two counties who have given consideration to making CCTV in taxis mandatory. Thank you to both Fareham and Gosport Borough Councils who have now implemented that as a policy with immediate effect. This follows a tragic situation of a rape in Southampton where the rapist was convicted without trial because of CCTV evidence that was captured from the taxi. He thought he'd turned his camera off, he hadn't, and he very violently attacked a young girl in the early hours of the morning on a Saturday night going into a Sunday morning, and as I say, he was convicted. We also know that a number of taxi drivers, particularly foreign nationals who are living and working in this country, who are often racially, verbally and physically assaulted, and there are sadly robberies that occur in taxis as well. This is a national campaign that I'm taking on, and I'm really grateful to the support of those of you who sit on licensed authorities who are considering this in the future. I've provided £350,000 towards tackling domestic abuse perpetrators. This is a change from previous domestic abuse strategies adopted through the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner, where previously it was about supporting victims of domestic abuse, but actually what we're trying to do now is to also pay money towards perpetrators, commission services to support perpetrators of domestic abuse. Because we all know that the best way to support a victim of domestic abuse is to prevent them from becoming a victim in the first place. And so this is quite a big shift. It's a sizable amount of money, as you know, £350,000. And I have commissioned that as part of something called a Project Foundation, which I'm happy to give you more detail about if you wish, at a subsequent meeting or today. And the charities running this programme are the Hampton Trust and Stop Domestic Abuse charity, who will identify the perpetrators that should be referred to the Hampton Trust for that perpetrator-led programme. The results coming out of it are phenomenal in terms of individuals, predominantly men, who then do not go on to commit crimes within a 12-month period. And as I say, I'm happy to share details of that subsequently if you need me to. I've supported the introduction through our Chief Constable, who is joining me today, Scott Chilton, with the Right Care, Right Person. This is about the incredible demands on mental health services that are coming into the police when they are actually not actually police-led. They are not police responses actually required. It's specialist mental health services, and Hampshire has been one of the leading forces in this field in the pressure on policing for several years, having mental health ambulances which have been delivered by Solent and Southern Mental Health Trust. Moving on in August, I held a session with the Chief Constable, a live stream Commissioner's Oversight of Policing Services. Some of you I also approved £600,000 for the rollout of drug testing on arrest in custody. £480,000 and £950 of that funding came from our drugs confiscation fund. So when the police are going into properties, businesses, or they are confiscating drugs, they are able to then seize assets that they believe have been paid for by the profits of crime coming from drugs. And the drugs confiscation fund is important. You will remember me saying this to you before, because we actually get to keep 100% of that income, whereas if it's from the Proceeds of Crime Act, it's only 18.3% of the money collected that the police get to keep. The rest goes to the Treasury, unfortunately. So it really is important that we've been able to fund some really important work when people are arrested for a crime, an acquisitive crime that is very likely to be linked to a drug addiction. They are tested in custody. If they fail to take the test or they refuse to take the test, they can then be charged charged for that as well. But the important thing is if they test positive for heroin, cocaine in their system, they are not charged for that. They are actually referred to a rehabilitation programme, which I'm also funding with the Integrated Care Board, and thank you to those of you that are involved in that. It's been a good piece of collaborative work. The Violent Reduction Unit has gone from strength to strength. We've got a programme covering 27 schools now with a mentoring programme of calling out bad behaviours, misogynistic behaviours in teenagers, and also about mentoring each other to call out any kind of racism or any kind of discrimination at all. So we're building that through. They're also tackling drugs and knives behaviours within young people as well. We've had some public awareness sessions with the British Horse Society, and I'd like to just sort of state publicly my thanks to the British Horse Society for contacting me to ask me to support them in their national campaign of giving clearance to horse riders on roads, particularly on country lanes, giving a good 2 metres or more clearance on a country lane or any road to keep horse riders safe. Safer Streets Round 4, big thank you to Southampton City Council for inviting me to be part of their short film, which has been really well received, including at the Home Office, who have been very impressed with the work that Southampton City Council, and in fact all councils across the country, have done. But if you haven't seen it, you should have a look on the Southampton City Council website. It is a short film that covers how £645,645 has been spent across the city as part of Safer Streets Round 4, and the brilliant work they have done, particularly in the nighttime economy, training up door staff. And in fact, there is some exciting news that will be out in the press in a couple of weeks' time, working with Go Southampton and the door staff again to keep people very safe. So more information will be coming out in the press in the coming weeks. Finally, then, my last few comments really. In September, we unveiled a memorial for police dogs, who are a type of police officer in their own right. They do have rights as animals working for the force, and a memorial was unveiled by the Chief Constable and I for that. We've marked the Emergency Services Day. I've also, you would have seen, announced the opening of 10 new police stations and front counters. Of course, we will cover this throughout the Police and Crime Plan update today, but this is very much part of me delivering on my promises to you and to the public that we are going to open the police force back up completely, make it as easy as possible for the public to report crime through front counters particularly, and to really drive up visibility of police to reassure and increase public safety and confidence. So much more improved police officers walking the beat, and the Chief may well cover that later for you as well. And then Safer Streets Round 5, there's been some success stories there. We're just waiting on the bids and the feedback from the Home Office on the bids that have gone in. I've committed £474,000 for a single all-age independent sexual violence advocate who did start on the 1st of October. Her role is to ensure that there is victims support for all children, not just for adults. We've got a lot of independent sexual violence advocates that work for adults, but this is for an all age, so it's for children particularly. Cowes Police Station, so I've made, since I've last seen you, confirmation that Cowes Police Station, the contractors are in there, and that will be opened in December, so that is good news. I attended a round table with the Prime Minister last week on the Middle Eastern conflict and the policing response to protests. I've also written to all faith leaders and to council leaders to make them aware of the victim care support that I pay for, the charity who we have ensured have got the right information and knowledge to be aware of the sorts of hate crimes that may well emanate from protests and from other tensions that are growing in the communities across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, but also across the UK. Last week was the Safer Business Action Week. You'll know when I joined you online for the training session that you had that I was there hosting that conference. I had a cyber crime and fraud conference which the National Crime Agency and the South East Cyber Resilience Centre supported last week, and we had a number of business businesses in the room, or importantly, people that represent businesses such as Hampshire Chamber of Commerce, Business South, and from the LEPs as well, to make sure that that information is being passed back to their members. Yesterday, I attended a topping out ceremony with the fire brigade for our new blue light hub being built in Cosham, so a new joint police and fire station. I was there with Assistant Chief Constable Lucy Hudson, and it was, I mean, it's going to be an absolutely tremendous site, and when it's open, it would be a pleasure to host a meeting there, a training session for the panel, and for you to come and see the excellent facilities that will be there, including a gym, which the fire brigade have said that Hampshire Constabulary staff can use. So I'm sure that every police officer who works in local policing is going to want to work at Cosham. Finally, the Winchester Cathedral Law Week, I was asked to host a panel on the Wednesday evening 2 weeks ago. A number of people attended. It was a good week. It's part of the High Sheriff's legacy of wanting to have a Law Week in the lead up to the Law Sunday Cathedral event that happens each year. And you know, I was really pleased to support that. And I chaired a panel on street pastors, particularly Winchester, and the Southampton street pastors came and shared their Tales from the Street, it was called, around what they do to keep people safe in our community. So a big thank you to all of them. So on that point, Chair, I'm going to hand back to you in case anyone, unless anyone has any questions for me.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Let's look around the table. Leslie Minahan first.
Thank you, Chair. It's around visibility, really, Donna. How's the announcement to open front counters been received by the public? And you previously stated your intention to bring about local bobbies, people know their names, email, contact numbers. Can I ask when the communities will actually know those details? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So the front counters and the new police stations have been met well. Of course, people sort of also observing that it's a shame that they closed in the first place, which I completely agree with and acknowledge. But yes, very much welcome that they are reopening. Obviously, we've got 13 front counters across an estate of over 50 police stations. There's many other buildings we've got that are not police stations, but of the 50 odd buildings, 13 have front counters at the moment. So that will go up to 23. This is phase one, as I've explained to you all before, with other sites and other locations that we are looking to improve over the next 2 to 3 years as well. So that has been received well. The second point you made was around the, can you remind me, sorry?
The named bobbies.
Oh yes, thank you. So really helpfully, the Chief Constable has brought forward the implementation date from April of next year to December. So 90 posts have been, the counties of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight have been carved up into crudely 90 areas. And so those individuals are being interviewed, recruited, from the existing role they have got as a police officer into one of those dedicated roles. So I hope to be able to bring you some information on that fairly soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tonya Craig next.
Just a quick one on the cameras in the taxis. I think it's an absolutely brilliant idea. There's been a history of people pretending to be taxi drivers and crimes happening. How much are they to put in the taxis, and who's picking up the cost for those?
The cost is being borne by the taxi drivers themselves in conjunction with the licence authority. I think I had an update from one of the taxi drivers that they're about £300 odd, £350. I genuinely don't know that, the actual, I think it was about that. But I've got a meeting, GMB, the union, have asked to meet with me, I think it's Tuesday of next week, because they represent taxi drivers, and it's actually in my national role they want to meet with me about this. But they are really keen for this to happen because they know that it will support their drivers and they want to give them protection. So it really is a two-way thing. But I'm happy to share updates with that with anyone who's interested, particularly if you're considering it in your own authority.
Okay, thank you for that. Matt next, and then Alan.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, on the CCTV in taxis, I think Southampton have run that for several years now, and it's been quite successful, as Donna pointed out. So, I would highly recommend that other authorities take that up. I think it can be very useful. I'd also like to thank Donna for the Safer Streets funding and hope that we can continue to see some of that support there in Southampton for that nighttime economy piece of work as well. And I'd also like to praise the drug testing on arrest. I think that's an excellent idea. I think it's great that that will be feeding into treatment for some of those individuals. And I think, there's some good progress that hopefully we can start to see being made in that space as well at the same time. I am, however, a little bit concerned around the right care, right person. The slogan is fantastic and sounds absolutely excellent, but I do wish to gain some assurances that this won't simply become an exercise whereby police are washing their hands of mental health care, particularly when it comes to supporting local authorities in their duty to deal with mental health problems across authorities. I wonder if you could give us some indication on your stance on that.
Councillor Renard, it's a really good point because we do need to make sure that other emergency services are safe, particularly ambulance drivers as well. So there's really twofold here to the calls that are coming into the police. Some of them, when it comes to mental health crisis, genuinely do need a police officer to attend because someone is stood on a bridge on a motorway about to jump. And of course, if the police are not there, then that could not only could that individual kill themselves, but also kill other people by mass pile-ups on the motorway. So it's about differentiating where a police response is required, where it's not. As we know, some people who are in mental health crisis, let's say if someone is having a very painful schizophrenic episode, they can become incredibly violent as well. And that, of course, means that there is then threat of harm to other people, which, of course, it's appropriate the police are there because they are trained to deal with restraining people in that way, but also keeping other members of the public safe or family members. But there are thousands and thousands of calls coming in to police forces each year where the ambulance is taking too long, and so therefore calls come in on the 101 or the 999, both. The Chief can go through this with you in more detail, but where actually it is really a care professional that's required. And actually one of the most scary things, I think, for someone who is in absolute mental health crisis is to be handcuffed or even not even arrested, but even putting into a closed space such as a car or a police van in a cage with a gate that locks and shuts. It's dark when the door is shut, and then they're put into a concrete cell. It is really quite inhumane if you think about the way that we're treating people who are in that sort of crisis. So the Home Secretary is leading this programme with the Health Secretary. There have been a number of conversations that have gone. This is a national programme, so Hampshire and the Isle of Wight Constabulary are part of one of 43 forces responding to that. However, where we are different is that we were the first force in the country back in 2018-19. From memory, I'm looking over the Chief Constable, who worked with our health partners in primary care through health and wellbeing boards and local authorities, Portsmouth, Southampton, the Isle of Wight and the county, to get commissioned mental health ambulances. And at one point, the mental health ambulances were turning up to 75% of calls. That has dropped right down for various reasons, which I don't know. I'm assuming pressure of demand, I don't know, but that has dropped right down. So I've spoken at a couple of APPGs in Parliament to talk about best practice and what it's all very well and good having right care, right person, but what does that mean then? Because someone has to turn up and help these people. You can't just not help them. So it's about what the solutions are, and we've been a leading force nationally in helping on the solutions.
Okay, thank you for that. It's just that reassurance that our authorities will be able to be accompanied by an officer when they carry out their duty in some of those cases where that's necessary. I think that's really important. And absolutely, there's enough resource for that to continue with the mental health ambulances. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, Donna. I'd just like to raise a question about some of your APCC announcements at the end, because I've noticed you've made a response to a number of kind of government statements and initiatives. There's one that's obviously not there at the moment, which is about their because of the overcrowding in the prison services and the reduction in the level of, shall we say, short-term prison sentences that we'll be able to give out, and the impact that will have on probation and restorative justice services in Hampshire, which are already under pressure. if we put more people in the community restorative justice system, it will need proper funding. And I'm also concerned that that would make, for instance, carrying a zombie knife by an adult in a public place a non-custodial service. And whether or not you've had any feedback from Chief Constable on whether that kind of deterrent is going to make their job harder in reducing knife crime.
Thank you very much. So on Monday of this week, I attended the National Criminal Justice Board, chaired by the Lord Chancellor, following the announcements that he made that morning. He called a meeting of national police leaders at midday, and then I spoke to the Prisons and Probations Minister that afternoon at 2:30 as well. Now, this is in my national role, but of course it's relevant to Hampshire and the Isle of Wight as well. The prison situation is a big problem, as we know, and the announcements made were announcements made because of the crisis, and I do underline that word, in the current situation. The measures that were announced, the Home Office are now reacting to and picking that up. On Tuesday morning, I attended the National Policing Board, chaired by the Home Secretary, and this was obviously discussed, as you would expect. I think the key point that you've made here is about the probation service and the alternative ways of dealing with these situations. So you talked about knife crime. It's all very well and good putting somebody on a tag or a suspended sentence order, but if you're not going to be paying for them to be in prison, the point that we are feeding back is therefore there needs to be money going into good, high quality community support to stop them from reoffending. So, for example, a prolific shoplifter or a burglar who are very often committing crimes because of their Class A drug addiction, and also carrying knives because they're breaking into people's homes or they're shoplifting and they're going equipped. The key point here is that locking them up, what we know with Class A addicts is it doesn't stop them from being Class A addicts. So actually prison isn't probably the long-term solution. However, it is a punishment, it's meant to be punitive, but actually if there is more money coming from the government, because they're not paying for them to be in prison, which is at roughly £90 a day, then let's put that money into residential rehab. There is already more money that's gone into day rehab, but it's very, very difficult if you are a 10-year heroin addict to crack your addiction when you're going back to your same accommodation every night with your same dealer around the corner and your mates that are probably also Class A addicts. So actually residential rehab, we know that the success rates that come out of that are significant. So that's one of the things that I'm going to be pushing for. I have got a contract, we're one of the first commissioners in the country to go ahead with this immediate justice sort of thing that's been talked about through the Prime Minister, hotspot policing and immediate justice to act as a deterrent for people to commit crime. Through the ICB, the probation service and myself, we commissioned a contract in May this year. We ran a pilot last year. I've commissioned it in May this year, and it is for immediate justice, which is outside of the criminal justice system, where the police identify it's right for that person. I can imagine now that is going to be stepped up massively because we've got going on. I can't stress enough that, yes, this is a problem in terms of those carrying knives and the deterrent to people who would otherwise go to prison for a sentence of 12 months or less. Yeah, it's going to be an issue. And do I think it's going to put a lot more pressure on policing services? Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. You'll come to Lizzie. Yeah, next.
Chairman, I just want to make a comment about business crime, which Donna mentioned at the very end of her report there, and to say thank you to her and also the Chief Constable for the increased activity that we've seen during Business Crime Week in Aldershot and Farnborough. There's been some well-publicised convictions that we've seen recently, but certainly businesses have appreciated the increased police activity and that are thankful that their complaints are being taken seriously. But on top of that as well, then members of the public are also taking reassurance. It's generated an awful lot of comment as well, and actually seeing individuals being carted off in handcuffs down the high street. Thank you.
Well, I mean, the Chief is here, he can hear that, but it is his relentless pursuit of criminals, and you will see on the Force's social media pages across the county that they are going after shoplifters in a big way. They are really stepping it up. It is no longer going to be a crime that Hampshire and the Isle of Wight Constabulary turns a blind eye to. So that is absolutely credit of the Chief Constable, Scott Chilton. So thank you very much.
Thank you. One from me, if I may. In your APCC announcements, Donna, you've talking about misuse of body-worn video cameras. How would PCCs play a role in ensuring higher standards are upheld? Is that simply if a complaint comes your way, or is there some other means of getting involved there?
Thank you very much. So, police and crime commissioners have, as part of our statutory responsibilities, hold scrutiny committees on things like stop and search, which of course then covers things like the use of body worn as well. There is consultation that's been going on about having specific reviews of body worn as well. So often it's in conjunction with a stop and search. So you're looking at the body worn because of that. But yes, so we do have independent people that sit on, and like magistrates, for example, sit on the stop and search panel that was run through my office on the out-of-court disposal. So is it appropriate that the force are recommending somebody to go to the Hampton Trust, the charity that I'm paying for? Is it appropriate that the force are dealing with certain crimes, lower level first offenders normally in the way of a non-criminal justice outcome, and instead doing it through an out-of-court disposal, which could be a community contract. You have to attend, an enhanced thinking course or some kind of drug rehab course, or as I say, for domestic abuse perpetrators, it's a very intensive 60-hour program that they do in groups of sort of 7 and 8. And so I've been running that through my office for the last couple of years. But what we do have is an independent sense check on, are the police force just sending too many our way to get formal outcomes, because forces are judged on formal outcomes. Are the police force sending too many in that out of court disposal way, when actually it would have been more appropriate for a formal criminal justice outcome on that one? So there is a scrutiny panel that is run through my office, and that is very much looking at whether or not it's appropriate, and they dip sample and they go into and they watch the body worn and they look at all of the information on that for those offences. They look at the outcomes, they look at the antecedents of the individual, and they will also do the same for stop and search.
But my specific question was around the abuse of body-worn video and police officers switching it off. And how can you be involved in stopping that happening?
Yes, so that is something that, again, through the oversight and scrutiny manager that I've got in my office, Ranjit Pathak, he is able to have access to the force data and information on that. If there is an incident where you would have absolutely expected body worn to have been there, we can get access to the information as to why it wasn't on. Was it a technical glitch? We can then liaise with IT to find out if that was genuinely the case or not. But yeah, so all of those things, if you want us to run a session for you on that, we can go into more detail, but that is absolutely something that we do have oversight and scrutiny of, and that we do monitor with the force.
Thank you. Leslie, you had another question.
Thank you, Chair. It's just following on from my colleague, Councillor Oliver's speaking about the sentencing. So the current repeat offending rates by offenders who have served prison sentences of less than 6 months is over 50%. Can I ask if the PCC believes offenders serving short sentences outside the prison environment into the community is an effective way of rehabilitating offenders and will lead to a reduction in reoffending and therefore a reduction in crime rates? Thank you.
Well, that's a difficult one. Time will tell. I'll tell you in 12 months' time. But in all honesty, if you look at the countries, particularly European partners, and you look at how many people we look up in this country compared to other countries, particularly those that have a slightly more holistic approach towards how to deal with, very often, I know I've spoken to you about this many times before, so I won't rehearse it again, other than to say childhood trauma, which is very often linked to offending, and it's not an excuse. I suppose it's a form of mitigation to understand why someone ends up becoming a Class A, dependent individual in the first place. So I do think that there is an opportunity here for the country to do things differently, but that is going to require significant investment, as we had the question earlier, into that community sentencing. And at the moment, the probation service are very stretched. Yesterday morning, I chaired the quarterly Hampshire and Isle of Wight Local Criminal Justice Board, and obviously probation colleagues were on the call, as were Crown Prosecution, judges, and we had a lengthy discussion about this very point. And, I've got a meeting as an action. I'm meeting with the probation. I'm going to meet with them all the time anyway, and so do my office, but meeting with the probation service and with the police force to really delve a bit deeper into what could be the asks that we go back to the MOJ, because the MOJ have indicated they're going to put some money behind this. If we don't give them a direction on what we think could be really useful and helpful, they will come up with a suite of options which could be useful or not. Sometimes they're not, as we know, when things come out of government. So we really want to try and help shape that nationally. And I guess because of the position I'm in with my national chair hat, I've got a good opportunity to try and shape that nationally as well. So I'm happy to bring that back as well if you need me to.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any further questions, so thank you. Oh, sorry, now I am. Philip.
Thank you, Chairman. So my question's around the reporting on the casework numbers. I need to get taller. So I thought it was really interesting that the 52% increase in reported casework, which I think is a positive thing, given the headings that they're broken down into. I just wondered, what do you attribute that success to?
Are you talking about coming from the annual report? The 52% that we...
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
We've got an item on the agenda on that later. Would you mind if I defer the answer until... Is that okay? I mean, Chair, obviously through you, I'm happy to answer it now if you want me to, but...
No, if you
Yeah.
deal with it later, that'll be fine. Yes, David.
Thank you for the receipt of your letter and the letter of the Deputy Chief Constable about the critical interest which must be paid by us in our role as representatives of local authorities with regards to the possibility of intercommunal violence in the light of present circumstances in the Middle East, and also of the heightened possibility of a terrorist activity as well. Would you like to tell us more about how you are doing, what you are doing in order to be able to reduce the possibility of conflict between our communities?
Thank you very much. Well, clearly, largely, the most part, this is an operational policing response, obviously, that's under the guise of the Chief. My role in this one is two-part, I suppose. Number one is to ensure that the Chief has got an adequate response set up for the growing tensions across the UK following the atrocities in the Middle East. And then secondly, for me, it's the part that I play as a voice, someone who represents the 2 million people of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, but also the hundreds of thousands of businesses that operate here, some of whom are run by Jewish and by Muslim community members, because actually there is a lot of fear within the Muslim community at the moment about reprisals onto them, because people think because of what Hamas has done that not everyone thinks this, but there will be a perception in the country that if you are a Muslim person, you are therefore, sympathetic towards Hamas and towards that terrorist organisation. So we know that there is fear on both sides. So I have written to all faith leaders to reassure them that the police force and me as their directly elected representative are there to support all of them. And at the moment, I have to say, community tensions and feel across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight is very calm. There have been a couple of vigils, obviously, for Israel, and there have been, I think, 4, maybe 5 pro-Palestinian protests. I think that's probably a bit of a strong word, but a public showing of support for Palestine and for what the people from that region of the world are going through. But actually, they're largely led by, in fact, in all cases, they're led by students. And you will get some other community groups, community members that want to join that, but it's the students of either side of this religious conflict that are showing their support, public support for their position. But it's been the Chief Constable has a gold group set up. One of the Assistant Chief Constables, Paul Bartolomeo, is the gold commander for this. The force have done an enormous amount of work in reaching into communities, in working with your councils and your emergency planning managers around the likelihood of protests. The force have got support ready through public order policing should they need to stand up something if there is something really awful that happens and then there's a big reaction across the UK. We know that particularly in our cities, without wanting to particularly point the finger at them, but that there can be a tendency for things to go from 0 to 100 very, very quickly in the cities. So the police are very mindful of that. And from what I can see, I've had one, as soon as this all started happening 2 weeks ago, spoke to the Chief about it. He gave me reassurance. I just come back off leave. He gave me reassurance. There was a plan in place. He directed me to one of his senior officers who then gave me the full brief. My officer also involved in that. And I feel very happy that Hampshire and the Isle of Wight Constabulary have a very good, solid, well-considered plan for dealing with any incidents that happen as a consequence of this situation that's going on in the Middle East. And actually, Hampshire and the Isle of Wight Constabulary has a good reputation when it comes to policing protests and the like, and doing it in a way where you don't get mass brawls, people injured and hundreds of arrests, because clearly that's not what we want or need here.
Okay, thank you very much, Donna. Thank you for that question. Thank you for all your questions. I'm going to invite now our Chief Constable, Scott Chilton, to join us for the next item, which is item 7. And Scott, you might like to just follow on quickly to David's question as well, in terms of operational matters and covering that community tensions issue.
Firstly, Chair, I'd like to say good morning and thank you for your invite to today's panel. Would you like me to provide any additional information that the Commissioner has outlined regarding our response to some of the tensions that we're feeling? Or if not, I believe the Commissioner is going to step through the next item on the agenda, but
If you would just cover off that item first, Scott, that would be really helpful. Please.
Well, I just reinforce what the Commissioner said, really. The terrible events that we're seeing overseas obviously caused a significant national response, and there's a national infrastructure that kicks in place through National Police Chiefs Council. That involves me being on a call and trying to understand where some of the tensions may lie, because obviously events overseas or in other parts of the UK can have an impact on our communities, even if our communities themselves are maybe upset but are calm. Immediately what happens is we kick in quite a well-versed system where through our local policing leaders they engage with faith leaders, with local communities, perhaps some of the minority communities that may be affected more than others, to provide them with some reassurance. We changed some of our processes in terms of accelerating our response around any reports of hate crime that come through our contact centre, and a daily meeting takes place within the force led by the Assistant Chief Constable to make sure that community tensions are fully understood, and we report those nationally, so we've got a national picture which feeds into the global picture around community tensions. The Commissioner's comments are absolutely right. We have had very, very little crime associated or reported in relation to events, but often those that don't feel as though they have a voice need to be encouraged to come forward and tell us what is happening within our communities. Hence the changes that we've made around local policing and policing our local communities differently now gives us some reassurance that we understand those communities well. We also have a number of trigger points should there be a change in the political situation which would spark perhaps mass demonstrations elsewhere in the world, that we can in effect ramp up what our response is. There is a system that is again quite a well-versed system of preparedness. We are a significant force in terms of our capability around managing protest. We work with the College of Policing nationally, the Home Office and National Police Chiefs Council to fully understand some of the areas that are not entirely clear around burning of flags, anti-Semitic language, behaviours that may well incite racial hatred. So far, things are in check. It's not a case of that is a period of time and it stops. I think we all anticipate that there's going to be an ongoing protracted period of conflict which will affect our communities moving forward. Similarly, the Assistant Chief Constables engaged with the Independent Advisory Group to seek their views as to how they may be able to assist us or be a bridge into our communities. And I speak regularly to other Chief Constables in the National Police Chiefs Council around it. Chair, I wonder if that addresses a question, but of course happy to answer it.
Okay, thank you very much, Scott. That was really helpful. You mentioned contact with faith leaders, minority groups, etc., etc. Presumably there would also be interchange with local authorities as well, if there were issues of strife within our communities.
I think we're extremely fortunate in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight in terms of we have a very good partnership arrangement with local authorities, with independent groups, statutory bodies, and I think that proven system of building those relationships over many years allows us to get to the nub of the issue quicker when we have these very difficult situations.
Thank you. Right, well, we are on item 7 of our agenda now, which is the Police and Crime Commissioner's Police and Crime Plan Performance and Effective and Efficient Policing Update. So then that's on pages 15 to 36 of our agenda. So Donna, over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to hand straight over to Pete for the presentation. Thank you.
Can you hear me now? You got me? Excellent, good, right. The IT is my nemesis, I think, isn't it? Good morning, Chair, good morning, panel. My apologies for those members that I'm kind of talking to your backs here, but I'm fixed by the IT this morning. So updates this morning against the police and crime plan, improved police visibility and easier reporting through 101. As the Chair's already alluded to, it was a really useful training session with members of the Commissioner and members of the office with the panel on Friday. Some very useful feedback in relation to that. That sounds positive. I'm sure it must be me. Thank you. Very useful training session and some feedback, and hopefully members, you won't see any acronyms or three-letter abbreviations in this presentation. So in relation to the Police and Crime Plan dashboard, this will be familiar to hopefully most panel members now. The significance of the dates at the top there in terms of July this year and September this year is the review dates that ultimately goes before the Commissioner in terms of the progress of the Police and Crime Plan and the percentage of those objectives. Remember, there was 122 in total against the projects, some of which you're going to see during this presentation have been evidenced. So there is a golden thread of effective and efficient police service going through this presentation in relation to police visibility and easier reporting through 101, and specifically answers the questions that were raised in the letter that the panel sent to the Commissioner on the 29th of September. So you'll see through this presentation on the slides and your briefing pack, hopefully, the specific questions that were raised and the presentation and evidence that's been supported against those. And as always, I think just to recognise that the time is limited to get, I think, that the entirety of the breadth and depth of the work that is taking place. But you'll know from previous presentations that the accountability and the monitoring part of the OPCC and the Commissioner's role very much challenges directly both the Chief Constable and the Constabulary, particularly in relation to those areas that support, ensure, monitor, improve activity. And hopefully I'll demonstrate this and you'll see through the slides and I'll point it out about how these are interlinked and in some cases dependent on each other. So first of all, with improved police visibility, you'll see the grey boxes down the left-hand side there. These are the areas that the panel has written to the Commissioner and asked some questions around. So again, you'll see this in the presentation slides, but that's just a specific project level update and dashboard as to where the progress currently is. So the first question was asked in the blue there about outcomes of review of police estate regarding the location of neighbourhood and policing teams. This is and will continue to be determined, and I think quite rightly, around the operational need of the constabulary. So those members that were at the briefing day on the 15th of September will no doubt recognise some of the next couple of slides that we're going to go through in terms of how that operational delivery is changing and quite significantly, and it also links in with that greyed out question on third paragraph down there in relation to location of police buildings. But broadly, this reflects the drive to increase visibility, that flexible, adaptable current and future needs, and understanding the areas within the counties and the districts that maybe require alternative provision, and some of the questions raised earlier around rural communities and business crime, very much part of those considerations in terms of where police officers are and the estates that fit around that. So just to bring that into context a little bit, again, slides familiar to the briefing pack that went out on the 15th, but very much linked to that new policing model that has been adopted. And again, I think essentially that that locality of police and local officers being stationed and visible now, as opposed to that sort of centrally commanded, focusing on that sort of local needs and delivery. And I think the police estates need to reflect this. So that's just a very brief headline of what the centralised old model looked like. And keeping in mind the question was around linked to police estate, I think questions have already been asked about when are the local named bobbies going to be in place. But if you look at those boxes across the top there, there's 6 boxes around neighbourhood enforcement teams, increased rural presence, local based investigators, area cars, district patrol teams. They all need consideration working both together and in some cases independently about what the state requirements are. So in relation to that question about how those state considerations taken, then that is very much part of that in terms of that local and geographical policing model. Next question was asked around mobile police desks in public places. Certainly in my old role in the constabulary, this was very much at the heart of what I tried to achieve, and not have that expectation that the public were going to come to the police. And actually this is about taking the police to the public. And there is a lot of activity that takes place that we're aware of within the OPCC and the Commission is aware of. And I've got many different examples of this, and hopefully within your district levels this is kind of reached your ears. But the list is quite impressive. So it wasn't my intention to go through all of that on the right-hand side there in the green box. It's just an example, but to give you some idea of the numbers that took place. So March 23 through to May 23, there are 27 full or half-day events and engagement, and between May to August, 9 full-day and half-day events, which included many of those county shows and events that we all enjoyed during those summer periods. Next question was asked around changes that have been made to location of police buildings, and at the risk of repeating myself again, many will be aware of the announcements that were made at the Partnership Day on the 15th of September. But I think there's a further part here around front counters and actually what that means that I felt the panel may benefit from hearing about, because there's a lot of work that's interlinked. I spoke about this being interlinked with contact management and 101. There's a lot of work that the front counters do that is, I think, possibly unseen. Certainly in relation to areas like bail reporting for people that need to do that, clear law applications, so that's around domestic violence, right to know, right to be informed, custody inquiries, fingerprints, general inquiries, property inquiries, intelligence reports, road traffic incident reports, sex offenders registration, insurance releases, the list goes on. And actually, whilst this makes it not only accessible to those that maybe would like to walk in and have face-to-face contact with the police. It also takes the pressure off contact management and 101, which you'll see in the slides that follow. And just to give you some idea of that, I've got some figures for you before I came here in relation to, and these are last year figures, but just in crime incident reports alone, so that's not including that list that I've just gone through, there's over nearly 6,500 crime reports at front counters. So the staff that are staffing these front counters are taking a lot of that pressure away from frontline officers and allowing them to be more visible, but also taking that pressure away from contact management and 101. And in relation to that, and you'll see towards the end of the slides an update from the questions been asked around online reporting. Then there is follow-up from online reporting. So again, last year, just over 14,000 follow-up from online reports and callback on crime. So these are where crimes have been reported and callbacks have been needed, over 6,500. So the numbers are quite significant in relation to what is relatively quite a defined number of staff within our front counters supporting that. It's really, really, really good work. Next question is around third-party reporting centres. So we've just heard a question about the conflict in the Middle East and about how that may increase community tension. So these have increased in the term of the Commissioner's time in office. There is a review, and it's not a review that's carried out by the police, and quite rightly so, because obviously you'll understand the idea and reason behind third-party centres is to take that away from, or take the connection away from the police so that they are confident in their third-party reporting. And some of that review that's taken place in some of the districts, and some of you will know about this, is about amalgamating some of those third-party reporting centres. They're community-led, they're independently organisations, and obviously that need for independence is ongoing. And the final question around improved police visibility was around provide an update on progress against investing in technology, free up police time from form filling. Now, I appreciate from the panel's perspective, probably sat there, you think actually that's a whole load of words on a page. How can we, as a panel, understand what all of that means? And I would, I'm sure the Commissioner would as well, welcome the opportunity maybe through your training sessions to look into any of those further if you did need a further update. But there's one on there in particular that I'm going to pick, and if you can see that at the back, it's the word Pronto, which is the name for a mobile digital solution that's currently in force. And I know the Commissioner has spoken about before in relation to 600 more police officers. It's not just about putting police officers on the street, but it's also about making them freeing up their time, making them more visible. And certainly conversations I've had with the tactical and operational leads, from my perspective in the office, I actually said to one of them, I really, really wish this had been in place when I was part of the service. I'm not quite sure it's going to convince me to go back, but certainly it's a really, really good system. And I'm just going to give you a bit of a flavour just to bring this alive a little bit more. So this digitises basically a number of police processes that officers can do on the street through a number of different devices. So things like pocket notebook entries into the record management system, searching of police databases, looking up through the driver vehicle licensing agency, having access to photographs, copying this information into other forms, and with a peripheral device attached to this, also doing some biometric searching so they can search fingerprints on the street. And I know from the role that I did about the data quality issues of scribbling something on a bit of paper at 3 o'clock in the morning and what that looks like at 7 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes the two don't match up. So actually the immediacy of that as well. So I was talking to the officers that are leading on this, and actually there's some live time intel that can go in. So previously on the street, some of those officers would fill in a form and that would go into a box and that would then ultimately end up on the system. They can put it directly into that. And that's then feedback. There's examples, many examples of where that's actually fed live time into people that are in custody or people that are or at risk of causing harm. Also, there's a link here with force control room, contact management, and also one-on-one. So you've got a sort of cyclical process here between contact managers, management officers on the street, and also front counters, because the information that's going through is not then dependent on some form filling, which then needs to put people into a system. This allows officers to do that, do this directly. So the principles behind this and how it supports officers being more visible is that it's more accurate data. It's certainly better outcomes for victims, because in some cases this allows officers to actually do community resolutions on the street. They're not form filling. They're not back at the station doing that important work. And it's a one-touch approach. So a lot of this information is not double keyed into other areas. And I didn't intend to go into that any further, but you can probably tell that I'm a bit of a fan of what I've heard in relation to this. But I have got a really good example here, and this really resonates with me in terms of some of the challenges. So this is an example with a domestic violence case whereby the offender was in custody. The family were really worried about the individual, and there was a crucial statement that was outstanding from the mother of the victim, who lived out of the police area. There was restrictions on the PACE time clock because, as you will know, there's only certain circumstances that the time clock and somebody in custody can be extended. And on this occasion, they felt that they were going to lose that opportunity, and they'd have to release the suspect. So, using this system, they were able to put a key statement to the mother of the victim that was then digitally signed, and these are all processes that have been agreed through the Crown Prosecution Service, which then enabled the offender to be charged, and Crown Prosecution Service authorised that took place, and the offender was remanded. And what came out of that, and there's many other examples like that, but what came out of that is, but for this system, actually they would have really struggled just to have that travelling time to physically put a bit of paper in front of a victim to be able to do that. So yes, this is freeing up time massively, but it's also giving a better service to victims of crime, and also allowing officers to be much more efficient and effective in terms of how they're policing. So I'd say lots of word on the page, but just a small example there just to put out but one of these. Moving on to making it easier to report crime through 101 as the second area. I haven't included any updates here in relation to the second grey area there about problem-solving approach to ASB, because I'm conscious that the panel have received extensive updates previously in relation to ASB and the task force, the ASB task force that the Commissioner leads on. So the question was around 101 call answering and response times. As you can see there, there's some data that's been provided, and I appreciate that panel members would have had some time to view this slide, and I know that the Commissioner will no doubt wish to comment further on this. So I'm just going to leave the slide in terms of just explaining some of the numbers and the terminology up there. So in relation to the date parameters, I'll just draw your attention to the 23-24 is between April and August, so that's 5 months. It would be bad form, I think, to divide that by 5 and times it by 12 to come out with a number. But if you did that, the numbers are reasonably similar. But of course, that's no way of presenting data, so that hasn't been done. But in relation to just to explain the Force 101 and contact management part of this. So the Force 101 is all the calls that come in on the 101 line. So this could be people calling in for the multi-agency hub, a specific officer, a department or custody. And the calls that come through on the contact management 101 are everything else. So this could include inquiries that are maybe directed towards other areas, such as people calling up and actually want local authority, DVLA or other agencies. So next, as a panel, you asked about how we're monitoring every incident of crime receives feedback. Again, some may recall the Commissioner talking previously about reports and incidents falling into what you could describe, certainly from perspective of a person reporting, as a black hole. Certainly, this feedback that went live in September means that if you're calling up for a number of different areas, incidents and also intelligence, then you will get some feedback from the call in terms of text and email. And if the keen-eyed amongst you look at those count of automated journeys, add them up and then say, Pete, there's a discrepancy between emails and texts there. I've tried to get ahead of that question. You'll be glad to know. So I understand the reason for that, of the volumes that are greater than the journeys, is because that for some journeys, the constabulary send out more than one message if there's a delay between actions. So if you've done the figures around that, that's why they don't add up in all occasions there. But certainly in relation to opening your curtains at 3 o'clock in the morning, actually reporting something suspicious, then you should get some feedback in relation to that call now. I'll just highlight those journey 1 through to 6 there in the blue, because that's relevant into the next slide that I want to share with you around the complexities of some of this. So the area in the white at the top of the right there wasn't designed a reading test for the panel to read. It was just to demonstrate the complexity of some of these victim journeys. So at the moment, and I know the Commissioner no doubt will want to talk about the victim care hub, so I won't talk about that. But at the moment, we've got those current victim types down the left-hand side, an extensive list, I'm sure you'll agree, where as a victim you will get a response, a text or an email designed very much to keep you informed in terms of who your officer in the case is and how the case is going, but very much trying to take that demand away from contact management and 101. The areas in the green box there around the complex victim considerations. So this is being worked on, but you'll understand that some of those crime types are, or all those crime types are not good, but some of those crime types are very, very complex, and sometimes a victim could be a victim of more than one crime, so therefore they need individual contact. But this is about trying to get right information at the right time to the victims, but also reduce that demand on people quite rightly calling back up through 101. So there's a bit of a summary there. I'm not going to read it line by line, but that particularly that victim officer in the case two-way messaging, second point up from the bottom there, I think is really, really important. It not only helps the constabulary ensure that they are compliant with the victim codes of practice, but obviously as a victim you want to make sure that you're satisfied with the response that you're getting and not having to call the police to get those updates. And the final question in this section was around providing an update on improvements for online reporting. You can see there in terms of change to previous year, both in 21-22, 22-23, and again the 5 months from April to August this year, that there has been an increase in reporting. You will see very clearly, and possibly have a question about why are all those categories different. It's not a police decision. It comes from the Home Office in terms of what the call types are through online reporting that will be recorded. Again, if you think back to the explanation around Pronto and the volume that the front counters take of some of what comes through online, you can start to see about how all of this starts to sort of work together in terms of trying to be effective and efficient. So that's a presentation for improved visibility and easier reporting through 101. I'll hand back to the Commissioner now.
Thank you very much, Pete, for taking us through the presentation. Just a couple of very quick comments from me before I'm then going to hand over to the Chief to give you some observations of his before we then move to answer questions, if that's okay with you, Chair. So as Pete mentioned, the Victims Portal is going live in February 2024. This will be my largest single contract that I'll commission through my office. It's been done very consciously to take the pressure off of the volume, thousands and tens of thousands of calls going into the contact management centre each year from victims of crime asking for updates on their on the incident or the crime they have reported. They'll be working alongside the Chief Constable's witness care team, of which there are 35 staff. And so this is me bringing in independent domestic violence advocates, sexual violence advocates, people who are there who specialise in cybercrime, fraud, working alongside action fraud. So all of the victim support that I pay for, making sure that we have people from each of those charities in the Victims Hub on a weekly basis, sitting alongside the witness care team to support. There has been some real successes in terms of 138% increase in RASO investigations where there has been a formal outcome taken over the last quarter. So that's, of course, a huge success to the Chief on that one. A couple of other comments from me. Obviously, the Police and Crime Plan is on track to be completed by the end of my term of office next year. We are 85% through that at the moment, and we could probably have got that up a little bit higher, but 85% is where we're happy at the moment. You have heard in the presentation about the new police model coming on board. So, of course, the recruitment of the Chief Constable in his starting date in February this year brought about that policing model incredibly quickly. Many other forces would have onboarded professionals such as Deloitte and others to spend a year considering looking at paying them a lot of money. The Chief had done this in Dorset. He felt very confident about what was needed here as a solution, came in, wrote it, got it sorted and got it implemented within 3 months. So I am incredibly grateful for the work that was done there. The ongoing scrutiny of the 101 service continues through my office, and I'm sure that we'll get into further questions, so I'm not going to dwell on that at the moment because I don't want to preempt anything that may be asked. In terms of that technology, we have also, as I told you before, invested in remote video recording, particularly for victims of domestic abuse, and the feedback on that has been phenomenal. Victims of domestic abuse really like being able to speak from the comfort of their home without having a police car outside. The mobile police desks and sites going around supermarkets and other, we gave you a sample there, but there are lots of those going on and that we get good feedback. I get good victim and public sentiment feedback on the surveys that I do all throughout the year through my office. New police stations and front counters I've covered, so I won't dwell on that one anymore. Save to say Cowes, Petersfield, Eastleigh, Cosham and Gosport are in the pipeline, and Hart, of course, as we spoke about before the meeting started, working with the council there to try and identify a site which would be really good, prominent location for the Hart district. More local bobbies. Thank you to Councillor Minahan for the question earlier. That is obviously one of my policy announcements that the Chief is, supporting and is robust in bringing that forward. 600 more police recruited, 650 now announced as per the budget that we're in at the moment. Again, overachieving on promises made back in 2021. A 25% increase in third-party reporting centres. I know that was something that you were keen to get an update on. If you have other sites in your boroughs that you think would be appropriate, please do let me know. And finally, from me, the fourth entry route into policing. So the getting rid of the mandatory police degree, a conversation the Chief and I had during his interview process, very much aligned on the same page here. And without wanting to be too dramatic about this, we have been instrumental nationally in that new fourth entry route. And I want to say thank you to the Chief Constable, the Head of Learning and Development, Liz Wiley, and Gemma Gare, the Head of HR at Hampshire and the Isle of Wight Constabulary, for the outstanding work that they have done, which has led to a Home Secretary making decisions around that new fourth entry route for all of policing across England and Wales. And finally, the Chief is also working with the military to bring on board military policing recruitment for those people that are retiring from the military at the end of their service. So I'm going to pause on that point, if you don't mind, hand to the Chief for a few comments, and then we'll get on with the questions, if that's okay.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, panel. I'm going to focus just the update around contact management, because no doubt that's where a lot of your questions will lie. Very, very quickly, though, as you know, I was at this confirmation panel in February. I made it clear as to what my plans were, and we would work at pace. I've changed the vision of the force, so our job is to make not only be a safe county for everyone, but everybody to feel safe, and that is really important, and that relates to the issue of visibility and confidence. There are 3 priorities for the force now, so we've simplified a bucket load of priorities to 3 that all my officers and staff are aware of. One of them is that we will relentlessly pursue criminals. The second one is we will deliver excellent local policing, and that's the community policing. And the third one is we put victims first in all we do. They are not exclusive, but that's what I want my officers and staff to do. Since I've been in post, as the Commissioner has highlighted, we've reset the whole operating model of the force, which is a seismic change, probably the biggest change in the last 20 years for the constabulary. We've introduced neighbourhood enforcement teams tackling local criminals, focusing around prolific criminals. We've got new recruits now getting trained in how to investigate burglary, theft, deal with victims of domestic abuse, rather than writing essays and spending too much time behind a computer, learning the practicalities of the job. I've reintroduced area cars, which starts next week, which are in the vehicles that will allow us to access communities faster in a more dynamic way, particularly rural communities. The estate, we're working with the Commissioner around resetting the estate, and I'm grateful to the Commissioner's support for working with my team to make sure we've got the right buildings in the right places. And why do we need that? Because we've put more local officers in local communities, more detectives working alongside local officers, and the response officers are no longer in big hubs. They are allocated to your local community, so they are a team tackling local criminals in their area, and also making sure that we deter those that wish to get involved in antisocial behaviour, that they will be tackled appropriately. We've got a new performance framework that's been introduced, and I've recruited a new Deputy Chief Constable and Assistant Chief Constable to support me in the team. So far, we know that crime is dropping and outcomes are improving. There are pressures on the criminal justice system. We know that. We've talked about that before. But the approach of having a proactive police force that is going to be responsive to the public is absolutely key. However, I recognise that the contact centre, and I highlighted this at my confirmation panel, and it's one of the things that the Commissioner and I spoke about during that process around how the public contact us needs to improve, and it was deteriorating before my arrival. So I highlighted those issues and gave assurances at the panel that they would be addressed. So the first thing that I've done is commission a team to do a forensic deep dive to really understand what the data is truly telling us and not just take the headlines. And we've seen some significant impact of those issues on our public, who often can feel as though the police are not responding to their calls, and that's simply not good enough, and something simply that can't happen on my watch. But it is not unique to Hampshire. We know we've had a tsunami of demand, particularly post-COVID. Every police force in the country is feeling this, and it's become a national issue of concern. I've appointed my Deputy Chief Constable who has significant experience in resolving these problems when she was my Deputy Chief Constable in Dorset. And I personally scrutinise every single element of data weekly, and she runs a group to try and address these issues and bring down those times. But let's not forget, this is primarily about 101. It's not about 999. If you call 999, the police will respond to you. And at the moment in Hampshire, that's within less than 7 seconds. The issue is about 101 and what matters people are reporting to us. So I've made it really clear to my staff that they need to focus on police demand, and we do need to work in a more intelligent way around actually where we deploy resources to. And we can't do everything for everybody. However, we need to do that in a really careful way, as highlighted by the question from a member of the panel earlier on, and I do agree with that. So just by way of example, in September, we received 58,000 contacts into police via phone, online, email, and just under 40% of this was not for police. They are not categorised as police incidents and don't require a police response. And of 23% of those overall contacts, so 13,500, they're the only ones that actually lead to a deployment being made in relation to a particular crime. So 13,500, 58,000 calls are the only ones that relate to a crime. So my priority, of course, has got to be about saving lives, professional, swift response, but making sure that we deal with criminal activity. But we do have a role to make sure we protect people. So there are 4 key issues. The first one has been around the significant ICT instability in our system. There have been some outages and some downtimes as we brought in new software, as we have to, as we all do on our IT systems, bring in new software, particularly in relation to operating secure systems, which of course there are new regulations on us to make sure that our systems are not accessible for those that wish to penetrate and access data that shouldn't be in the public domain. But what that has resulted in is some IT systems going down for a period of time, which is reflected in the figures, particularly during the summer. I've put a significant team of ICT consultants working alongside the business, floor walking, dealing with the issues as they go along and making sure that they're truly tested before we implement them and then the systems don't go down. There have been significant recruitment challenges within the contact environment for several years, and there is nationally. And it's a very competitive job market for that type of work. When I took over, there were 85 vacancies over an overall establishment of over 300. So we had a 25% vacancy gap. I've now reduced that to 40. I've got 36 people starting in October, and I've got a significantly different approach to how we recruit people into contact environment. And the retention of staff is crucially important, and the retentions are significantly improving over the last 2 or 3 months, and I've achieved that through not just personal messages, but looking at some terms and conditions and working arrangements for those staff to really value the really difficult work that they do. The other thing that I've done is I'm going to open a contact centre in Portsmouth. We've got one at Netley, which is where it's managed at the moment. That affects our job market. It's a difficult place for people to get to, particularly those that might have children or family caring commitments. So opening a contact centre in Portsmouth, and the response to that has been really significant. And we've got the first group of people joining that in November, and we should start to see performance improvements as I look at a different way of modelling contact. The performance that we've got in contact, the data that you've seen today doesn't reflect the last 2 months. It's showing really positive hard work, but it's important to understand that Hampshire and the Isle of Wight have truly ethical reporting. There are some forces that interpret data in a different way. They could take the call and put it into a bank of other calls and then deal with it later, but the data is taken from the first time you answer it. We deal with everything the first time. So our data is truly ethical, and we have true ethical crime data integrity as confirmed by HMIC, one of the very, very best in the country. So I'm really confident that I know what demand is coming into police and how then effectively we understand the risk and we prioritise that risk moving forwards. It's important, though, that the panel have opportunity to understand how abandon rates work. So their abandon rates figures look quite high, but I've changed the technology so that we've got voice automated recognition system that divert people either to online or to other agencies that are the right agency to deal with their query, which obviously means they put the phone down. But still, of course, it's an incomplete call, but the information has been given to them to direct them to the same place. And that is very much work in progress to try and nuance that and make how we provide the public with the information that they need so they phone the right agency. So we need to push non-police demand into the agencies or provide information online or through other mechanisms. Part and parcel of that is front counter, opening up the police stations, making ourselves more accessible. So those people that perhaps aren't digitally literate, so to speak, actually can still have that opportunity to speak to people face to face. And both the Commissioner and I are really aligned in our vision around having a police force that is accessible for all. But the abandon rate is reducing month on month, and it's now down to 25%. So I've already seen a 20% reduction in that. And it's important that we answer the phone quickly, but we deal with matters quickly. So this month, the average time is now, and it was very similar for September, is now 7 minutes on average. But that is the overall 24 hours a day, 7 days a week average. It is more often than not less than 3 minutes to answer the 101 call. Now, I'm not claiming victory on this yet. We've got a lot of work to do, and I won't be confident until I've seen sustainable performance changes over a considerable period of time. There are always pressures on policing and all public services, as we know, throughout the summer, and policing is no different. But the issues of ICT instability, staff recruitment shortages, and the overall demand at peak time has been a problem during the summer months, but we're addressing the issues. The other issue is we have a contract with BT, and there's been difficulties with BT passing the calls over to police, and there's been some delay in there. That is a national issue that I'm working nationally to try and resolve, but that can skew your data significantly, so you can't just take the data at face value. Also, we need to look at the demand that's coming through policing. So demand is really complex and comes in many ways, on phone, single online home, people going into police stations, people bumping into one of my officers that's on the beat. So in September, we had 58,000 contact calls through those methods. 39% of those did not lead to an incident. So 39% of overall calls did not lead to an incident actually being recorded by the police. So it's not a police matter. It might be advice, but it's not requiring a police deployment. And 23% of those contacts resulted in a crime. So it has a huge impact on our capacity. By way of example, 1.2 thousand incidents related to concern for safety or illness, and we had over 1.1 thousand missing person reports. I'm addressing those issues through introducing missing locate teams, specialist officers that deal with these type of things all the time. It's a far more efficient way and obviously protects those individuals that are at risk or those individuals that present risk to other people. But we're not stopping here. We're heavily investing in the right technology to make sure that we actually have a not only clear understanding of the data and the issues, but we have a roadmap and a pathway forward to make sure that we're actually a really modern, agile service. And one of those areas that absolutely we need to look at is how do the public want to interact with us? Well, the bottom line is in many, many different ways. So by introducing new police stations, opening more front counters, introducing more voice recognition and automated processes where people can report crime and get access to data and use of the victims portal, it puts us truly into the 21st century. But it requires investment and a plan, and we need to do it right, and we need to stabilise our systems. We're introducing rapid video response, which is where people actually don't want to see a police officer, but they want to have a face-to-face as if you would do on FaceTime with officers to get advice about how to deal with a particular incident. And that's proving to be really successful in relation to domestic violence, where people don't want a police car turning up outside their house and causing difficulties in terms of neighbours, family, etc. But it can be used in many other areas as well. And there are many other aspects of the things that we've reformed, particularly in relation to business crime, rural crime, targeting the proactive work we've done through Operation Relentless, and thank you, Councillor, for your kind comments. It is going to be a relentless pursuit of criminals, but also making sure that local officers have those sustainable partnership relationships with many of the people that we all work with day to day, to try and actually stop crime happening in the first place. But when it does happen, you've got a workforce that will investigate crime. But we need to ensure up this contact system with a clear plan. So the headline is we are improving considerably. There are very, very encouraging green shoots of progress. We will be judged on the sustainability of those and the feedback that we get from our communities and the public. But we do have a very clear plan. It has my personal oversight as Chief Constable weekly regarding our progress, and is a priority for me to make sure that our community feels strong and safe and confident that they have a police force that's responsive. I'll leave it there. There's more I can answer in relation to any of those particular points, but back to you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Chief Constable, for your for your address, also for the data which has been given to us. A great deal has obviously been achieved, Scott, since you came into post. And it's most heartening to hear about a lot of that, and I'm sure all of the panel would be absolutely supportive of the relentless focus on catching criminals and getting them locked up and making people safe, really safe, feeling safe and being safe. And of course there are differences between those two. But we have asked for data on 101, and you've rightly focused upon that today, because clearly, excuse me, all is not good there. It's reassuring to hear that things are improving. And I think what I would ask, if the panel would agree, it would be helpful to see this data, I think now on a monthly basis through this period. Clearly things are improving. You've given us some new data, but those data were not before us. I think they need to be. So I think it would be helpful if our officer can ensure that from your office, Donna, we receive that data and we see it monthly on 101, just to keep us aware and just to see what the trend looks like, because clearly it is something that is of significant concern. And looking at, on the face of the data that we've been given, 45% abandonment, I will come to you, Donna, when I've had my little say here, a 45% abandonment of calls. Now, you're saying to us that is now less, which is obviously really good. But 101 is something that we advertise, and the police advertise as something that people should be able to use comfortably and confidently. Sadly, ever since it was introduced, that has never been the case, and it's always been a service which has not been of the best. Some of the worst calls you can make to any public service are when you're asked to press buttons for 10 different choices or something, which I know 101 doesn't offer. But for me, the next worst thing is being told, oh, and now say what you want to a machine, which is then supposed to identify what you're actually saying. And my heart sinks when that happens as well in dealing with a public service. So I hope that can be looked at carefully to see whether it is actually successful or not, because this is clearly a public-facing service which needs to work. It doesn't work. Perhaps it's starting to work better now, which is good. So overwhelming positivity with everything you're doing, Scott. But as I say, just this real major concern about this part of the public interface. Now, just to guide how we move forward now, I am aware that the Chief Constable needs to leave at noon, so I have been asked to ensure that any questions which are specifically for him, we take those first before we move to any more general questions after that. And I'll also say, because I have been asked by one or two members, if we can take a little break in a meeting which is going on quite a while. So when we get to the end of this agenda item, we will take a short break, a comfort break for members. So anyway, I don't know, Donna, you kind of waved your arms around. So if you've got something you want to say at this stage, and then we'll work around the room and see what other members want to raise.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to be clear here that the role of scrutinising the force and the data on a monthly basis is, of course, mine. And the panel's role is to scrutinise what I'm doing of that. I'm happy to present to you what I am doing if you require that on a monthly basis, but I would like to suggest, if you don't mind, through you, that you have your main panel in your training and, you know, your informal panel, that actually I perhaps present you some more detailed information such as we've had today there. That may be a better way to do it, because I'm very cognizant of the fact that there is a lot of work going on behind the scenes through my office with the oversight and scrutiny of 101, including we have attendance at the Gold Group every week. So there are things going on, but of course that is the role of me and my office in law.
And that would be really helpful, thank you. But obviously we're not going to be sitting down with you once a month. So if you can furnish us with that, that would be really helpful.
Through you, Chair, if you don't mind, I'll put something in writing to you on a proposal.
Lovely, thank you. Right, well, a number of hands have flipped around, so I'm really just going to work around the table, I think, because most people clearly have something. So, yes, Maurice.
Yeah, excuse me, thank you, Chairman. I mean, I think overall the trend is going in the right direction. I think we can take assurance from that. I just wondered on abandoned calls whether there's any data that collected that people access the 101 service through other means. I mean, I know I've done it myself when I phoned up and found myself in a lengthy wait, that I've just abandoned the call and actually then gone on to report it online, or it may be that someone marches down to the local police station and reports it on the front counter there. So I wonder whether there is any data on that, but I certainly welcome the initiatives that the Chief Constable is taking, particularly I think in the addressing the shortage of staff within the call centre. I feel absolutely certain that is going to really pay dividends in addressing many of the concerns with members of the public in trying to access the police.
Thank you. I'll pick up one or two questions and then we'll come back to Scott. Gwen.
Okay. If I may, Chair, I have a question and a request. Can I do both of them, because I know everybody? So my question is, there's been a really positive recruitment drive, and you've managed to recruit. I'm more concerned also about retention, and I know that is something that is in your eye line. Do we know? Do we analyse why people are leaving? And is there any way of retaining those very experienced officers? Shall I give you my second one, or do you want to answer that first?
No, please carry on, because I'm going to have your points,
Okay.
then I'm going to have Alan, and then we're going to get some answers.
The second point is I have a request, and that is that when police officers have to take somebody to A&E, they can actually be taken out of their shift for a considerable length of time. And I'm wondering is there any way that really we can work in partnership better with the NHS, that when a police officer brings somebody to A&E who may have been arrested and they've got to do a safeguarding or whatever it is, that in fact, rather than, sort of sitting at the back of the queue, that they actually, so that that can be dealt with and that police officer then can get back on with their job and back on the beat, so to speak.
Okay, and now Alan's point, and then we'll get some answers.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I've got two questions on the report. One is one I fundamentally dislike RAG status reporting because I think it actually hides things. So I've got two questions on this. One is on the centralised old model, because when residents see this kind of report and they look at dedicated local bobbies, named police officer for every beat, big green box, big tick, they'll say, so who's mine? And at the moment, that hasn't been implemented. So I just think saying it's complete gives us a bigger problem than saying it's in progress. Okay, so I don't know how you decide which is green, amber and red, but I think that gives a completion status, which gives us difficulty when we say it hasn't actually happened yet. It may be in progress. At the top level, it's done. At the ground, it's not. And similarly on things like 101, how that can be classed as amber and not red at the moment, I would dispute, because I think it is. And the question is, have you taken into account in terms of the volumes that you will get when it becomes a operative service? Because at the moment, certainly with the business and retail community, which I had a meeting with last week about trying to put the disc service in, they have completely abandoned the 101 service. They don't report shoplifting anymore because of the issues of reporting and staying online for 10 minutes. So have you taken account of the, shall we say, the non-reporting that when 101 becomes operationally good will come through in terms of the volumes that you may have to address?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, members. I'll deal with questions in order, and then the Commissioner will probably add something. In relation to the data going elsewhere, it's a really intuitive question. It's very difficult to say what somebody might have said, but we do know, and therefore they put the phone down. So how do we know that same call then went single online home, or they decided it wasn't for them? But the information that is available to them, and we're constantly working on this to make simple, accessible information either through the when you're waiting on 101 or online, indicates that people are using other services. They realise that they can actually report crimes or incidents online, and we're using emerging technology to do so. But it's very difficult for me to articulate the level of forensic analysis of the data to look at all the different nuances and quirks that exist in this to actually get a true picture about every contact, what somebody might have said, wanted said, was it a police incident or whatever. But we've made considerable progress in relation to that. So the headline is many of those are now going online because we're seeing headline numbers increase online. But of course, we can't be truly confident that they haven't then put the phone down and phoned 999. Because that might be a way that they feel as though they're going to get a response quicker. In relation to the second question about retention, absolutely. I value retention as much, if not more, than recruitment. We have a significant investment in working with people that might be considering choosing another career or leaving because there are issues that are affecting them. So they're all personally interviewed by a line manager and then a senior line manager above them before they get to that particular point. And we have put additional resource in the control room working with people, so they're sat next to the controllers listening to what their concerns and also how we can make their conditions better. Part of that is I've refurbished with the Commissioner's support the estate to make better working conditions, because being locked in a dark room for 10 hours answering calls is quite stressful and impactful upon our brilliant staff. The other factor that I would like to say in relation to retention, a big part of the challenge that's grown over the last few years, of course, we've recruited police officers like we never have done before in the last 10 or 15 years with the Uplift, the National Uplift Programme. So many of the contact officers then decided that they want to be police officers, which is great for policing because they've got an understanding, but you've got this constant cycle of rotating people in and out of the organisation at different points. So we've got to deal with both of those issues, and there was so many jobs that were available post-COVID that didn't involve working 24/7 with better pay scales, because we were on public sector pay scales. We've had to work around all of those issues, but I'm feeling confident that we're turning the tide. We will just need to make sure that it's sustainable. On the third point around a question around A&E and mental health, that goes back to the earlier point about actually what is effective use of police time and which is the best organisation. The first thing we need to try and do is stop officers actually being responsible for doing the job of ambulances. I know they've been significantly under pressure. I do appreciate that, and during the winter months that will become more acute. We're working at a national level as a commissioner, outlined with health, and we now have protocols in place about what the police will be deployed to and what they won't. It's exacerbated by situations such as police escorting people to mental health establishments, or taking, which isn't the role of the police to do, and wait for them to get a bed, or the police to take a child that might be in care from another part of the country and then having to drive them up 300 miles to drop them off there because there's no social worker available to be able to deal with it. That is not the responsibility of the police. But of course, we can't leave people vulnerable and at risk. So we've got to look at every possible avenue, and we are looking at the point you made around sort of fast tracking it. And we need to do that at a local and a national level, but it is difficult but incredibly important. On the last point, I think, Donna, probably you might want to lead on those. So thank you for the questions.
Thank you very much indeed. And on the retention of staff, if I can just backfill as well, there were 8 to 9 on average, 8 to 9 staff members leaving per month last year because of the reasons that the Chief has said, because of recruiting 200 officers on average per year, plus backfilling those that retire and or leave for other reasons. The force has actually recruited almost 1,300 people over the last 3 years. And if you divide that down per month, there's been so much opportunity. That's slowed right down now because the net increase is going up by 50 over this year and not 200. So that I think is on average 1 to 2 a month now, just through retirement and other things, which is much more normal. In terms of the A&E and the point...
Sorry, Commissioner, I'm really sorry to... Yeah, so the average leavers per month, we've reduced by 50% over the last 3 months, so 50%. So that number down, we're down to 2 or 3 people a month now that are leaving. I'm sorry, Commissioner, to talk.
No worries, yeah. If you've got the specific, that's good. The A&E one is a really good point. I mean, I'm really happy to write to council chief executives and ask them if they can review that. I mean, obviously, from their perspective, the fact that there are police officers sat in their A&E departments for hours on end is really not their problem. Their problem is to triage and treat sick people as they come in from a medical perspective in the way that you would expect them to. But it is a good point where we can work with our NHS partners. They know the pressure that we're under. They know that the police are responding where ambulances otherwise could or should be in some incidents as well. And we've got great partners through Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. And I do sit on the strategic ICB, part on the ICP, the partnership board. So I will take that as an action, if we can log that one as well, Jace, to write to all of our council chief execs and ask them if they can be mindful of that as well. In terms of the local bobby completion point that you made, and I understand completely, I've just looked back at the slide, I understand completely why you've said that. So there's 2 things. So the RAG rating that we do for what's been achieved, what's done, tick in the box, and what's not, whether it's red or amber, is here. And we've just given you a snapshot of some of the questions that you'd asked. If we had all the every single one of the 126 different pledges that have been made on my police and crime plan, and we went to the named local bobby, it would not be green. So it's not currently included as a tick in the 85% completion. The slide that you're referring to, which was that one where it does come across, and I understand completely why you think that, and thanks for the feedback, because we'll make sure that we make this clearer next time. This was about the old operating model versus the new operating model. This was just us saying, in the new operating model, tick, 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 these are all the things you will have. But I do understand how, if you remember the public, you could view that and think that looks like it's been done. It hasn't. So I think that's a really key point, and we'll make sure that we don't use that slide in that way in the future and make it clearer that this is about the old model versus the new model. This is basically saying the attributes of the new model. So we need to make that clearer for you, which we, and for the public, which we will do.
Thank you, Donna. Continuing on, Brian.
Thank you for that. It'd be nice to know a completion date. But my other point was about the volume, the unmet volume that's going to come through to 101 when people believe it's an effective service. Because there's a lot of people that don't report now. I think shoplifting is one of those. It's whether you've actually taken account of that volume increase that's going to happen in the future.
I'll allow the chief to cover that one. I'm just going to cover the completion date for the local bobbies. At the very beginning, you probably remember me saying it's December this year. It's the implementation of the 90 people.
We're doing a lot of work around predictive true impact of demand when we get 101 working in a sustainable way that I referred to. I still say the demand that we're getting through, much of it isn't for the police, so it goes hand in glove with the assessments, and we've got to educate and support the public, and there are other organisations that need to take responsibility for what they're primarily financed for to do. And we need to do that in a sensible way. So it's a combination of changing of the model in terms of effective deployment. The way you reduce crime is actually by catching criminals and locking up prolific people, because there's a small number of people that do a lot of shopliftings and cause a lot of antisocial behaviour and violence. So focusing on a relentless pursuit of criminals will be a deterrence. At the same time, having local officers in those neighbourhoods with those additional resources, knowing their local villains, that is a real way of understanding and targeting those people to try and get the right behavioural orders or work with agents, put them through the right parts of the criminal justice system. I will say, however, I am concerned about the current pressures on the criminal justice system, and that is CPS, that's probation, and the courts, and as far as prisons, to be able to actually apply the right sanction and deal with it as we continue to arrest more people, which I will continue to do. Other parts of the system need to look at reforms as to how they're going to take that additional capacity. So I do expect an increase in 101 for the reasons that you've outlined. I do want businesses to report crime. We will tackle shoplifting. We've already started to make changes around community behavioural orders, focus on particularly on shoplifters. We're having dedicated shoplifting teams in our cities to address this particular problem because it has got out of hand. But that has to be done along with industry and with those victims, and particularly those independent chains that are feeling the pain of it. So we are trying to predict that demand, but we're going to have to step through that really carefully, but make sure we continue to make sure the demand goes into the right place and the right organisations. If you stop us guarding people, being sat with people in ambulances outside hospitals, those officers are released and they can focus on those prolific offenders that are actually committing shoplifting as a living.
Thank you. Sorry, I do need to keep going. We've only got 7 more minutes and almost as many people. Vice Chairman.
Yeah, I'll be really quick. Thanks for the report. On page 32, regarding the 101 data, you have something for 2023-24 regarding rape and assault cases. There's nothing mentioned in the years before that. Just wondered if there's any reason for that. Yeah, but that's the one. Yeah. So on the reports for the year 23-24, you have data for rape and assault cases, but on 21-22, there's no data for that there.
If you don't mind, I'll defer to Pete on this one because he put the slides together. I think it's because of the Home Office change reporting requirements, but I'll allow Pete to answer that one.
Yes, it was exactly that. So the reason being that if you see they're all different, it's because the Home Office required different reporting areas in different years.
They change it constantly depending on what the priorities are, but what we've done is lifted exactly what the Home Office asked for and shared that with you.
Leslie.
Thank you, Chair. It's just firstly to thank the Chief Constable and welcome the change, bringing the fight to the criminals. Certainly in Gosport, residents welcome the change from reactive to proactive. And I think the Hampshire Police are a force to offenders and a service to victims. So I think the balance is good. Sorry to bang on, it's about 101. You referred to the national picture of demand across all forces of the 101 service. Why do you believe the increase in demand has gone up so much? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, there has been a significant increase in the National 101 demand, which the Chief will fill you in on as well in a minute, but we have seen an increase of over 40%, particularly over the last couple of years since COVID. And I think a number of other public sector organisations have moved much more to online and not having staff working in buildings as much as they used to. So as the Chief Constable said, of the 58,000 calls that came in, only 13,000 were actually police specific. There are loads of calls that come in all the time, and the volume is going up when it's more difficult, for example, to get hold of a council around fly tipping, stray dogs, people parking over my driveway, and queries, as we referenced before, about mental health crisis. So there needs to be a shift back to the right agencies, because it is having an effect on how the police can, in a timely manner, respond to crime, prioritise that and get through it. So there has been national guidance issued. The College of Policing have been working very closely with the Home Office. The Home Secretary is very focused on this, because of course for her there has been, not that anyone intended this to happen, but there has been almost a shunt into Home Office services, i.e. police forces, on the demand from the public, for good reason, but the 101 service obviously is a non-emergency number, and that is, I think, why people feel that they can call it, and that's why there has been a significant demand. But actually where Hampshire is really good and is in the top half of forces in the country, as the Chief Constable has said, is in answering the 999. And the current numbers that have been achieved over the last month, in terms of around the 3 minute mark, or just under, in terms of call waiting, would put us in the top 10% in the country.
Thank you, and thank you for your kind comments about Gosport. I'll feed that back. Of course, as well, the reporting requirements on things like antisocial behaviour, new crimes have been created, and therefore that actually takes time, because we need to record the crime up front. So when someone phones up, that all takes time. So there's additional things that we need to do. There's the tsunami post-COVID of the way that the society operated. I think there's also, and I don't want to label it just young people, but many young people think that they can operate with impunity and you know, antisocial behaviour is acceptable. We have a very different view around that, but because that is a recordable offence and there's been a reduction potentially in some of the services provided for young people, has meant that antisocial behaviour has increased generally quite across the board. And of course, in some respects, you can't take all the data at face value. If we get more reports of domestic abuse, that is a good thing, because people are coming forward. If we're getting more reports of rape and serious sexual assault, or violence against women and girls, or children that have been online targeted by sexual predators from other parts of the country and are now reporting them, they all go into that pot of demand. And that's the sort of thing that we absolutely should be investigating, and the public should expect us to respond. But so sometimes higher figures are good figures. It's not always negative.
Thank you. Ian.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I'd like to thank Scott and Donna for putting so much effort into improving 101. I often get comments from my residents saying, there's no point, nobody ever answers, or I've tried, I got fed up hanging on. So it is something that needs to look at, and it's one for confidence for yourself, really, that the public have confidence in the system. On the Isle of Wight, we have an online system for reporting highway faults, and it's called Fix My Street, and it's run by the Highways Agency, and it's excellent. The public have got hold of it, and they report all sorts of things, relevant to highways. And I just wondered if we could promote the online reporting of 101, really. You know, we talk about 101, but we sort of sideline the online bit. Maybe we need to highlight that more prominently. That's it.
Again, thank you for your feedback. I wasn't aware of the Fix My Street. I will make sure we have a look at that. We've got to get that balance right. The point was made by Chair actually around not doing too much automation and technology, because sometimes we need to make sure that people speak to a person at the end of the phone and don't feel like we're just a faceless service. But there are many people, you know, you interact with your doctor now often in a virtual way, and we'll do a telephone appointment at the end of it, and introducing things like rapid video interviews that we can do online, so I don't need to employ an officer, based on an online report, in many aspects is the way forward. We've got to reform ourselves. So there is definitely some strong merit in the comment around signposting and working to better to educate the public, and that is actually, we've got a new public engagement strategy, a very clear way about how we operate in terms of how we deploy, but how I expect officers to work with communities in terms of whether they're walking up and down the high street on the beat, or they're sat in the contact centre, or they're sat opening a police station, about the sort of standards of professionalism and how actually we make sure we early on identify and signpost the right people to the right place, because it draws huge efficiencies out of our system. So thanks for that, and we will absolutely make that point clear when I go and speak to them later on. Thank you.
Chair, can I just come back on that as well, if you don't mind, very quickly? I'm conscious of time. When you do phone the 101, as the Chief Constable said at the beginning, you do get that initial message that says it is possible to report online. So as you've got your online reporting for the Island Roads, you are sort of directed in that way if you are someone who is IT confident, IT literate, to do that. So that is done straight away. And then also through the CMC 101, which is this new telephone system and everything, which I've invested in, which well, it was done prior to Scott arriving, the decision to take it forward. There will be other functions coming forward, such as when you phone your bank, push 1 and you'll get a call back when the next call handler is available. So there will also be that too, because I'm very cognizant of the fact that whilst going online and this shift to the online is more efficient for the police service, actually, a lot of people that phone the police are very vulnerable, and actually doing things online, as you said, does not always meet their needs. And if they can't read and write, going online really doesn't help them. So we do need to make sure that we have that absolute front-face contact as well.
Thank you. Luigi.
And thank you very much indeed for the reports and the updates. They've been very useful and quite open and transparent. I've got a couple of comments and questions. First of all, in terms of the 101, because it's the easier one, I mean, the Chief Constable quite rightly mentioned the importance of contact management. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's all these other things like counters. And I know that a lot of people are much happier talking to a police officer. They don't like doing it. As far as I'm concerned, though, I have to warn you that, speaking to charities yesterday, there's a great underreporting of a lot low-level crime, especially antisocial behaviour, violence between the youth, because to a certain extent, there's whole segments of society have given up on 101. Okay. There was a problem with the crime, with the online reporting as well at one stage when we went down to Netley. Somebody made the point that the insurance company and other ones didn't like the crime, they weren't getting a crime reference number, okay, and that was putting people off who would otherwise report, of it. Brilliant. I'm very grateful for the brief from the Chief Constable on that, and I hope that we get more information on how that whole contact management thing goes on. The other issue that I've got is this question of the improving of the visibility of the police officers. Right, that comes up time and again, and it's a major issue. I think that there's a danger that by sending out press releases saying we've got 600 new officers, we actually raise expectations. The problem is that until they finish their probationary period, they're going to be very, very limited in what they can be used. And certainly, what I picked up when I went to Netley was that sometimes I had one supervisor and three rookies, right? Because people in Andover, for example, are asking me, well, police officers are becoming a bit like buses, because they don't understand that you've got one supervisor and then you've got the three rookies. And I think that's a message that we need to sort of explain so that people understand, okay? Because there's a pipeline, and we'll get jammed tomorrow, but I'm sure that will happen. Anyway, and the other thing that I think Councillor Ola brought up is that we need some timelines, right? Okay, because people are asking me when are the local bobbies appearing on the beat in Andover, right? Okay, anyway, we don't even really understand what the beats are going to be. We already have bits of the neighbourhood policing teams which are still operational, but they're very, very few because most have been sucked into other things. And what I'd like to see, and I understand it's very, very difficult, but when I speak to the local district commanders, we don't know. You know, it seems to be the answer. So I think it'd be very useful from a police service perspective to say, you know, I don't expect great detail, but I know you're planning ahead and, you know, and doing all these things, is to give people some idea, because that's a potential way of managing expectations. You know, that's it. And then finally, the third-party reporting centres and stuff like that and local business, that's quite an interesting thing. And it goes back to, I think, what the Chief Constable was saying is looking at all the reporting thing. I think we need to be clear who those agencies are or aren't. And this is a question that's said in Test Valley in the safe partnership, you know, for that part of Hampshire, people are being asking is exactly who. And, you know, as local leaders, we can help you and say, well, actually, you should be speaking to these people as well.
Okay, I'm going to see if there are any other questions, which will be for the Chief Constable down this last members, Tonya, and then obviously Scott will be able to round up and we can carry on with Donna.
Thank you, Chair. I think you said that of the 101 calls, 60% or 40% of them weren't police matters, and 23% of them were taken up. What happens to the other 37% of those calls that are made? That's the first question, and then the other bit.
If you've got any others, please toss them in. Because
Okay, the other bit is about, we're talking about, it's 101. I mean, Shirley and I sit on the same parish council. The parish council have used 101 to try and get somebody out for ASB behaviour, which was youths on a roof. It's a dangerous being up there, regardless of what damage they're doing to the building, and nothing ever happens. No feedback, nothing. And then we have, on my phone, I have an email from the local officer, PC Peacock, that says, we hear that people are using 101. We don't actually get the calls come in. We need to do some community work. You as a councillor should be reporting it to us. We try, nothing's done. We get no feedback. So it's a bit of, you want to work with us, but only on your terms. And I mean that in the nicest way. You know, we do a lot of partnership working, community working, but it seems that they're not interested when we're reporting it the way we should be. And then when they're getting flack for not coming out and dealing with it, then they want us to report it and work with them.
Okay, conscious
I'm going to go first, if you don't mind, because the Chief's got a few more minutes. I just want to cover the points that were made, and then the Chief can backfill on some of that. So the underreporting of crimes, I completely agree with you. I think that is absolutely the case. I get the same feedback as you do from members of the public, particularly with youth crime, young people being threatened to be stolen, mobile phone, earpods, coats, jumpers, whatever it is, expensive clothing. I'm pretty sure that a lot of young people are not reporting those things, so I couldn't agree more. That is not a good position for any police force to be in, but I think it is commonplace across the country. That does need addressing. The reputation of 101, I agree with you. It is going to need rebuilding and repairing. And I guess there's no better way to do that than by being successful, as in the 101 service working the way that it needs to. And then that is going to take, I think, probably a few years to repair that before people start to say, actually, you know what? I did get the phone answer pretty quickly, or I went online and reported, I got a response. It was actually a pretty good service. I do honestly get lots of positive feedback about the service from the force as well. Local bobbies, yeah, so the and the feedback that you gave around the 600 and the visibility, good feedback, thank you. I do understand what you're saying about raising the expectation that the public think, well, you should be seeing everyone, but we do need to make that delineation that there are some that are still obviously in training and are not 100% operational at the moment. In terms of the local bobbies, the beats, what, you know, those beats you refer to not knowing where they are, we haven't shared that data yet. So as I say, the local bobbies will be in place by December, and at that point we'll be saying to you what patch they cover, who they are, name, phone number, email address. So actually, in terms of the 101 being a problem, I do think that by having better and a more efficient 101 service will help. But having more front counters, that will help, because some people that would otherwise phone when they're out shopping will pop into the front counter. And also having more local bobbies. I was at a rural crime meeting organised by a county councillor just south of Basingstoke on Tuesday night this week, Monday night this week, and Andy Jones, who was the PCSO, local PCSO, was there, and 3 or 4 of the things that were raised during the meeting, the member of the public public who was raising it said, actually, and I did email Andy and let him know. So actually, they've kind of already got their local bobby really, because they've already got that connection. Not all communities have, but I know that when they do, that should take some pressure off the 101 as well. The third-party reporting centres, they're all available online, so I can take an action to send that round to the panel so that you can all have a look, click on the link and you can see where they are in your patch. So I'll take that as an action, including who those organisations are. A lot of them are linked to faith groups where you have particularly females, for example, in certain communities who don't feel confident approaching the police directly. So we have third-party reporting centres linked to minority groups to support them. And in terms of the use on the roof, I know that Helen Wilkie, who is a DCI who works in my office, one of Scott's members of staff, took that away last time, but happy to revisit that. And I do take on board the point you're making. Oh, all right. Sorry, beg your pardon. All right. Thank you. Sorry.
I will be super quick, Chair. I won't recover the points. There is a lot of devil in the detail. I've changed the way that we recruit people and train people from a 3-year programme to a 2-year programme, and in 15 weeks they're out there on the street with their tutors learning how to arrest people. That didn't happen. Many of those people were in protected learning time, so there's probably a lag and a perception, quite understandably, that the new officers haven't hit the ground. We do need to recognise as well, we're in a cycle where I've lost so much experience from policing and brought in so much young new recruits that they do need time to learn to do the job properly. So not everything will happen with a flick of a switch, but there is a really clear plan around doing it. But we couldn't do any more other than actually accelerating their sort of hands-on approach to doing it. In relation to 101, I would argue a similar issue arrives. Your point is heard loud, and I felt that before I even took this job, because I spoke to members of the public about the issues that were affecting them, and that's why we're putting these these changes in place to 101. The other thing that I'm doing is, under the new local officers, this new local approach will mean that many of those officers, those neighbourhood officers, are going to be ring-fenced in their beat and not abstracted to do other things, which hasn't happened previously. So they will, over a period of time, get to know their PCSO and their PC in their local area. Of course, there is still a nostalgic view, which is unsustainable, that they're going to see an officer walk past the end of their street every day. That's just not realistic with the issues that we need to deal with. So we need to just make people feel safe and be responsive and contactable. But of course, we've got to be realistic in what we say. But your example is one of those where actually I don't want to hear the police aren't interested. I would expect us to take the call. It might be we don't deploy straight away, because on a Friday and Saturday night, there are people getting, viciously attacked and people in crisis that might take precedence over something. But your point and your feedback is exactly the sort of thing that I want to resolve. So thank you for raising it. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Chair, there was just on the figures that I said about 23%.
Yeah, I think it was about 37% that was left. Those are the things that we deploy to because life might be at risk, or there's another agency not available that we've got no option to do. So we deploy road traffic accidents and many of those things as well. We deploy resources. It might be that there's somebody, I don't know, a bailiff going somewhere and there's an issue that the police need to deploy to. It might be an issue of concern that isn't necessarily fully evident. It might be a domestic abuse victim that just wants to speak to an officer. So it's a whole range of things that in itself might not be a crime per se. And of course, firearms incidents and public order duties, etc.
Collecting missing children when children's services...
And can I just make the point that I was saying about parish councils? We used to get PCSOs and police come to parish councils, which is where we can feed in what our crimes are, what we're listening to, which is the kind of thing that PC Peacock was asking. So when we get those local beat officers, if we could see them at parish councils, a lot of partnership work was done during that. I mean, I sit on 3 parishes and a town council, so a lot of feedback was done through that, and it would be good to get that back again.
No, thank you. I mean, for the record, I really value parish councils. They've got eyes on the community. They've got the contacts, always have done. When I was in Dorset, I mandated what you've just described with the neighbourhood officers. I will take that particular point away and speak to the person that's leading on the new neighbourhood plan for me to consider how we can achieve that.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed then, Scott. I just on the point on parish councils, I would also say that as most of the population in the constabulary area is not parished, do also bear in mind residents' associations, and I know from personal experience they too value police officer attendance at their occasional public meetings as well. and it goes down well. Anyway, thank you very much, Scott, for your contribution today. It's been really valuable to be able to question you and put you through your paces again as well, which is most valued, most appreciated, so thank you. I'm going to adjourn the meeting now until, should we say, 25 past, but we just need to agree to note the report that's been placed before us in this item. So is that agreed? Okay, so 12:25, talk about the annual plan in your report. on to item 8, which is the Police and Crime Commissioner's annual report for 2023. You have received this. You've received a supplementary element as well, which was another bit to the appendix about complaints. So the report is there. Donna, do you want to present the report, or do you just want to take questions on the report?
I'm happy just to take questions in view of the time, Chair. I'm conscious people have probably got other things they need to get to as well.
Okay, well, I can actually, hand on heart, say I read it. I have read
I'm
it.
glad.
So, all of it, but I'm sure everybody else has as well. So given that everybody has read it, questions, please, and I'll run around the table again. Shirley first.
I actually have no questions. I thought the report, I sat and read it from 5:30 one morning. I thought the report was absolutely excellent. It summarised everything you've achieved in the last 2.5 years. I was so impressed. Just 2 observations. The length of it, who's the audience, will they be able to sit through the toe curling, data after data supply? It's a shame, but I don't think they will. And for me, just as an observation, page 53 for me really should have been after the foreword. And page 53 is the bit where we see Donna, and your enthusiasm for the future just jumps off that page. And I thought, who's going to make it to page 53 to see that? And I would have liked us in that after the foreword. This is a foreword, but you know what? This is the future as well, before you read all the rest and get tired. So really, I think it's a really excellent report. Captures everything you've done and said. And because of that, I've got no questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I assume you're happy with that, Donna?
Thank you so much indeed. That's really, really, I really mean it. It means a lot to me. Thank you very much, and to the team. We haven't printed you shiny versions of this because I want your feedback. So I'm going to take an action to move that right to after the forward. Thank you very much. It's really good feedback. So comms team are sat there. If we can move the page 53 to page 3 or 4, whatever it is. Thank you very much. Do you want to say something, Jace?
I was going to say exactly that, and I noticed Laurie smiling as you were saying that, Shirley, so thank you very much indeed.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else with a question? Just looking at this side of the room. I'm coming around this side of the room. Yes, Philip.
Thank you. It's great that you remembered the page number. So I'm going to talk about page 10, because I too read the report. No, it was a great report, thank you. It was absolutely brilliant. My question actually is a very minor question. So on page 10, you're talking about the uptake in reports, the case working, and I was just curious, not concerned, but just curious as to the 52% increase over 12 months. I think that's good, but
Thank you very much indeed, and you did obviously make that point at the beginning, and I should have come straight back to that. Thank you. Yes, we have seen a significant increase in the volume of casework that the OPCC are working through, and I've now introduced in-person casework surgeries, much the same as you will have as councillors. Thank you very much, and also that members of Parliament have, because I think it's important. Some of the things the public come to me with are really complex issues, and where they've had grievances with the police that have gone on for years, it's really difficult to get that across in an email only. So I've introduced surgery appointments, number 1. Number 2, I get people coming to see me who also work for the force as well, almost, I guess, a form of whistleblowing. That is a very small percentage, I should say. And I also think that the more you help people, you become not a victim of you become a success of your own success, So I've got a really good team around me, and it's not me that, I would say the surgery appointments account for probably 1 to 2%. A lot of the casework, I see the stuff that comes in. I have a casework meeting every Monday morning. We've got 2 or 3 people that work in our casework team, 1 full-time and 2 people that support in other roles they have, to Luke, our caseworker. And he used to work in contact management, so we did actually take him from the contact management team. I feel terrible about that, but actually he's really knowledgeable about the force, and he will give me a summary each week of, like, for example, if there's been stuff coming in around what's going on around concerns around pro-Palestinian Israeli, protests in Hampshire, Isle of Wight. He'll give me a flavour each week. Anything that requires from any of you or from your councils comes to me directly for my steer and sign off. But a lot of things, actually, a lot of the casework that we get is people coming to us not realising that they should be complaining to the Police Standards Department. So it's us saying, thanks ever so much, actually, you go here to make that complaint. And then your right of appeal is to us if you're not happy with what the force have done. But the vast majority of what I get is people who are unhappy with the service they've been provided by Hampshire and the Isle of Wight Constabulary, because either a case has been NFA'd too early, or it wasn't investigated properly, or they're disappointed with the criminal justice outcome, which is not obviously down to the police, that is separate. So it's then me explaining their victim's right to appeal through the Crown Prosecution Service, or things that are not covered by current legislation, where there are gaps in the law that I then will take away and speak to the Ministry of Justice about for potential law changes. But we have seen a massive volume. I think it's probably because I'm putting myself out there in the media, radio interviews, TV interviews, putting out press releases, being in printed press. People then see you, and if they see you, they think, oh, when they've got a problem, I'm going to go to you. So that's basically, I think, the reason why.
Okay.
Chair, sorry, could I just add a line to that before you just move on? Because I'm just conscious that not everybody was present at the event on Monday from the panel. So just to add to that, one of the key things that we took into our restructure was anticipating an increased volume in that casework. So if there's any other members that would have any further questions or value a little bit more information about how we're structured, what we're doing, how we're doing it, just drop me a line and I'll facilitate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question. I'll give you the page number 34. Yeah, 34. It's on ASB, and it's it's good news if we believe it that ASB is down, because the kind of feedback from residents is it's not going down; it's getting more. Do you think this is about underreporting ASB? And so we're actually maybe, it's a bit like shoplifting, which is meant to be going down because there's less shoplifters being prosecuted, but it's a lot of underreporting. So do you think there's an element in the good news of not taking account of underreporting of crime?
Yes, I do. Think that is definitely a key factor, because it doesn't feel to me like, being someone who lives in this county as well, that we are seeing a substantial drop in antisocial behaviour. But what happened was 2 years ago, we had a spike when we had COVID restrictions, when people were at home and there was less to do, and people were in their homes more, working from home, playing their music louder, and people that would normally be out of their home for 8 to 10 hours a day because they were working were then there the whole time, and our elderly neighbours were then thinking, oh, they don't normally hear noise during the day. So actually, there were a whole load of reasons why there was a spike a few years ago, which is artificially high, and I think it's come back down to normal levels. Do I think that there has been a substantial drop in ASB across the country over the last 5 years? No, I don't. I think you're absolutely right. So could be a bit of underreporting. I do think there was an artificial spike during COVID. And what I would say, though, in terms of ASB numbers, what's happened here in Hampshire is absolutely reflecting the national trend of up and then back down.
Thank you. David.
Thank you. Just to repeat the laudatory comments which have been made, excellent report. Thank you very much indeed. I do have a question. I have a question which relates really to the pages where you give further details of the way in which the funding which is available to you as Commissioner is spent. In common with many others, I believe that our communities have lost a lot of resilience over the last 3 years, particularly post-COVID. I'm also very conscious that as a representative of a local authority, our core services have been reduced. And this relates really back to the idea of trying to reduce the number of calls that come into 101, which are not police related. And it's really to invite you to look further at ways in which you may use your funding from whichever sources in activities that will support the rebuilding of community resilience, so that alternative means of being able to answer some of the questions that come through to 101 are more available to people locally, whether that be through voluntary groups, other community groups or whatever, and to use whatever opportunities you have to further support the resilience of communities.
Thank you, Chair. Really good point. And it's absolutely key for the long-term reduction in crime, as you say. Perhaps, if you don't mind, maybe at one of your informal training sessions, I'd like to share my community grants around process, how it works, share with you all how much money I've given out over the last 2.5 years and on what type of things, because it would be good for you to know what money I'm giving to grant organisations in your patch. But I absolutely take on board the point you make, and I agree with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Luigi next.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Donna, thank you for you and your team for a very good report. I particularly like the case studies because that, I think, I did look where the grants were going, and I did feel that in some cases local communities were probably not pushy enough, and I certainly would welcome some. Some briefing by you. Let's not call it training on what you're doing, for example, on youth provision, which is a big issue, especially since, unfortunately, Hampshire County Councils has massively cut its grants. And towns like Andover, which is actually bigger than Winchester, are getting the square root of bugger all, frankly, if you may pardon the expression. I thought the things were good, and I did like the case studies, and I did appreciate the fact of the list and explaining why grants were given to certain places, and hopefully that will encourage some people to apply for them. Thanks.
Thank you. Gwen.
Donna, great report. I just have one question. So I was looking through, basically all of the different programs and the money that you've put in. And I think it's fantastic. I'm maybe going to sound a bit negative now. So let's take, for example, the Football for All programme, which is about kids that are offending and trying to stop them from reoffending. Do we measure, do you or your team, do you actually measure the success? Because for that particular programme there, that was a sizable sum of money, 2.25 million. So, do you follow up and measure to see the effectiveness of all that money that you've put towards that?
Thank you very much. Yes, we do. So there's two ways that we give out money. One is in grants and one is through procured contracts, where I am saying to a charity or putting it out there to whoever might want to apply, we need this service run, we want it running this way, we want you to cover this number of hours for this number of young people in this geographical location, let's say with youth services. Where it's a procured contract, yes, they have to give us performance management data every month and then more data every quarter. So if the contract is failing, let's say, for example, I wasn't very happy when I became police commissioner, and things have got better, but if you were a victim of rape or serious sexual assault, how long you had to wait to get an appointment to speak to a therapeutic counsellor or, in fact, an independent sexual violence advocate who are not therapeutic. They are there to support you through the criminal justice system, so you understand the point of making sure that your victim's impact report, your victim impact statement is done properly, because that could have a material impact on sentencing when someone is convicted, when the judge is then considering what the sentence should be, and the probation service are writing the pre-sentence report. And it also gets taken into consideration by parole boards as well. So it is really important, the victim impact statement. So if it's a procured contract, yes, we have lots of data and we performance manage, and where those contracts are not performing as they should do, I've got 4 different commissioning managers sitting under somebody called Kate Gunson, who is our head of criminal justice and commissioning, and one leads on DA, one leads on sexual violence, one leads on sort of all the trauma-informed, public health, all of that sort of stuff, drug testing on arrest. So we've got things in different areas, and then we've got our violent reduction unit, which is for the 14 to 24-year-olds, and there's a whole lot of programme work that goes there as well. The grant's slightly different. So I've just finished a couple of big grants rounds. One was £850,000, where I'm saying I've got this money. I've run 2 this year. One was a general grants round. Any crime, could be youth, could be Andover, could be Yellow Brick Road, who I've given some money to in your patch, Luigi. So they can bid in to say, I've got an idea that is going to help stop either youth crime, it could be rural crime, it could be domestic abuse, whatever it is. And I've done a rural one this year as well, and I think that was about £350,000-400,000. Again, I can give you this information aside from today, so I'm not. So you have the actual figures and the facts. So people will come in, and then as an organisation, and a lot of them are the charities that I'm commissioning in other ways as well. They'll bid in Yellow Door, Stop Domestic Abuse, Yellow Brick Road, Awesome Chance in Gosport, for example, and several Motivate in Havant in your patch. They will come forward and say, we think we can run this intervention for perhaps 6 months if you gave us £15,000. So where it's a grant that's given out, they do feed back to us the outcomes, but we're judging on the principle of what they're asking for at the beginning. And because it's not a procured contract, our recourse to that money, getting it back, if they don't do a brilliant job, is more tricky. So we have to just get to know who these people are and judge whether or not we think that they are an appropriate organisation to be receiving public money, and if they're good at delivering what they deliver. With the grants rounds, where we've got a couple organisations who haven't delivered previously, they get scored down, and we score the grants bids that come in. And we've just had that in the grants round where my commissioning team said, we haven't scored, on paper it looks great, but we know they twice previously they've not delivered what they said they were going to deliver in the grants round, so we're not recommending it to you, and that's fair enough. So yeah.
Yeah, just to add to that as well, you know, we never forget there's people on the end of this as well. We talk about money and kind of actually service provision, and there are, and we brought to this panel previously some case studies around actually what. So it's about also, it's not just about how a particular service provider is performing, but actually some case studies that are down to a very individual and sometimes powerful level. I'm sure you agree about actually how we listen to and understand what it means for individuals that are benefiting from some of these services that are commissioned.
Yeah, fully understand. You know, yes, it is about people, but of course it's, you know, these are public funds, and I just want to make sure that, and clearly you're on it. So thank you.
Right. Anybody else? And in that case, thank you, Donna and colleagues, for what I think has been universally supported as an excellent annual report. So the recommendation is that we receive the annual report, which I assume members are happy to do. And I don't think there needs to be a sort of formal, we want a bunch of changes type recommendation to it. I think there were a couple of points made, most notably by Shirley at the beginning, which I think you've taken on board, Donna, and will make the appropriate amendments. So I think we just receive the report on that basis. So thank you very much indeed. So we have just a couple more items to hit. Next one is item 9, which is the Police and Crime Panel Working Group arrangements. Now, there's been a lot of sort of discussion about this, and we've had a couple of meetings as we've gone along, and the move which is being proposed, it'll probably only be a couple of minutes if you want to hear these, as it does affect obviously how we work with you. So the report which is before members is effectively to end the sort of subgroups apart from the complaints subcommittee, which we do have to have, and it's a move to briefing sessions, significant briefing sessions for all members, not just meetings for small numbers of members, which will happen on a regular basis before the full meeting of the panel. And you've heard today in some of Donna's answers specific briefings that she's happy to give us on that informal basis, which I think could be very valuable. And my incentive in this is that it is for everybody, and all of these sessions will be for everyone to become involved, to delve further in what they want to do, which will help, of course, inform the agendas for these meetings and the sort of information that we get presented. So the report is there, and specifically what it's asking us to do is remove the Policy and Performance Working Group and the Precept Task and Finish Group. And after today, if this report is agreed, then dates will be consulted on and found. The general preference seemed to be that these briefings should be Fridays, so that's what the officers will try and achieve. And also, before each meeting, this is formalising the process of a letter from me to the Commissioner in advance of each full meeting of the panel, outlining the information that we require for the next panel meeting, which I'm sure these briefings will also help inform that, so everybody has input, and I think that's what's important. So does anyone wish to comment on any of this? Matt first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, I'm in strong agreement. It'd be a great idea for all of us to come together to have those briefings. I do have some concerns around the depth of information that we might be able to obtain in such a large group. So there would be a slight air of caution, I think, on how those meetings are conducted. And what freedom we have. It's probably the only opportunity we have to meet collectively as a group without being in the public eye, and I think it's really important that we have that opportunity.
Thank you. I hope that's exactly what we'll be achieving. Simon.
Thank you, Chair. I just really wanted to go to point 12, because I think point 12 is a very admirable objective, isn't it, to ensure that we have more informed and enhanced scrutiny and that we have more discussion and challenge in this public meeting. Those are all the things that, of course, we should be aiming for, and I support the implementation of this. I think we just need to keep paragraph 12 in our minds when we come to evaluate whether it's achieved that. I'm only acutely aware on Monday that we had what I would describe as a relatively small proportion of the panel there. So conceptually, I can't disagree with briefings, but if our authorities are anything like my authority, I am a great believer in all member briefings, but we get 6 people turn up out of 54. So I worry that actually one of the reasons why we went to having subgroups was that actually we could do that in-depth work with those people who were interested and make sure that we then did a good handover to the panel. I'm very supportive of implementing it to see if it works, but I think we should keep those objectives in paragraph 12 in the forefront of our minds.
Thank you very much, Simon. I certainly support that feeling. And I think where Monday's meeting was concerned, Monday's briefing, of course, that was set at fairly short notice. My intention is that if the panel agrees this, then these dates will be finalised next week and they will be there for the rest of the municipal year. So I hope with significant notice, people will find it much easier. And I think people tend to attend meetings that they find useful, rather than things that might be regarded as not so useful or talking shop. So these briefings will be what we make of them. But what I do know is we have the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner's full engagement in this. And from their point of view, of course, I'm sure it is far more beneficial to brief all, the many rather than the few, especially if then we end up rehashing it all at a panel meeting. So, Gwen next.
Sorry. Could I just add to what you said? I couldn't make the meeting on Monday. I had to take my husband to the hospital. If it had been, because if I recall right, it was an in-person meeting. Now, if that had been an online one, I would have been able to attend because, but as it was in person, it would have taken a great deal of time out of the day and a time when I needed to be down at the hospital. So I would ask that, these meetings, I think, yes, definitely in person, but I would make a request that for those types of briefings, that there is the option of Teams, which then, of course, will make it much easier for other members.
Okay, thank you, Gwen. Yeah, we'll certainly do what we can do to facilitate the widest possible attendance, but I just always have a caution that a hybrid meeting, the people who are online always feel a bit like second-class attendees, because, of course, meetings like this are far, far better, where you can see people and touch them if you want to and everything else, so, or not.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just on, Teams meetings would help for some of us. The other thing is that, yes, it was short notice, so that would be very helpful, but also some of us have got the day job to do as well. So if we can't have the meeting in the same week as the panel, that's going to help with our scheduling.
Definitely. Okay, Luigi next.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. as a newbie, I've got issues about this slight change in programs. I understand the particular benefits that you're looking for, but the attendance was not very good, which quite surprised me, but that's the way it is. I think the timings of them are quite important. I would ask that in future we also have people who are outside the office of the Police and Crime Commissioner come to brief us, or our own Democratic Services officers, because I think it would be useful if we gain some independent insight. I'd also like to thank very much the officers from the OPC who came along, because actually I noticed that you changed, Peter, part of your briefing to take into account the issues that was raised. And I think if we're going to have that dialogue, we can't have it the same week as the thing, because it's not fair on councillors who work, but it's also not fair, on the office of the PBC to sort of change things. Okay, and it may have been that if it was up to you, we'd have rewritten large parts of that brief in a slightly different way to take into account of the issues that were raised by us. So I'm quite happy to, I'm agnostic about it, but I do agree with the point that Simon made, is we really need to be careful that you set yourself a particular objective, right? And I'm trying to be constructive in my criticism. We didn't really meet it, although we tried hard, certainly the people who sort of turned up for it. But, and I take the point that a lot of people work. So for a lot of people, Mondays is a non-starter, sort of. Anyway, so I know I'm rambling slightly, but I think I'm trying to think, yeah, it works, but it needs clear planning and getting the dates right and people's availabilities as well. Thank you.
Thank you. That's really helpful, and I think that's exactly what we want to achieve. So it won't be in the same week as the panel meeting. There's a preference being expressed for Fridays. I've not heard anything opposing that yet. So it'll be presumably about a week before the panel, but the dates will be sorted out now, right through till May, rather than trying to do each one as we go. Are there any more points? Anyone? Yes, Tanya next.
It's just that I do, and I mean, this is going to be no surprise to Donna, I have a real thing about precept and making sure that we're getting that value for money. So for me, I'm a bit, I don't want to lose the precept task and finish group. I think they've done a lot of important work, and I'm not saying that Donna doesn't give us the correct information, but people that were on the precept had the ins and outs and knew exactly the questions to be asking, the bits to be probing. And I think it affects every resident in Hampshire that we in this room then make that decision as to whether the precept goes up or not. I think it's something really important that we shouldn't lose, just the precept one. I do think that everybody in the room should be briefed, and those briefings should come to us all. But it's quite in depth, isn't it? The precept and what it gets spent on and all those types of things. And I just think it's too much to lose, really, that particular working group. So I would kind of ask if we could think again on that one. The training was short notice for Monday, and I heard Donna say that she joined online. I was thinking, if only I could. I went out to start my car, and the car has decided it is now had enough. It's died. So if I'd had that option to get online, I would have done. But can we have any of the kind of training information that was given that day? Any slides or anything like that would be really helpful for all of us.
Yeah, thank you. Last point first. All of that was circulated yesterday. So all of the slides and the links were sent out by email, which I hope everyone has received. And then on your point about the precept working group, the intention is to have 2 briefings looking at precept, which will come before that. So again, for everybody, we are setting, or we are agreeing to, a precept which affects all of our communities, not just 3 or 4 people, 3 or 4 councils. And I think that's why it's so important that we're all involved in briefings on the precept, and there will be 2 of those specifically. So did you have another point?
Sorry, unfortunately, we did not get, and I did ask at the end of the meeting on Monday, if we had your speaking notes, Donna, because you were cut off when you're trying to get it. And I know the amount of information you have per minute is quite huge, but we missed quite a few things. For example, your interaction with the Minister of Justice. over it. So that would be quite useful to go in with the with the slides that we got. Okay. I don't know if you had notes or you're just speaking from the thing. Okay, but that would have been very, very useful because it set a lot of the things that you were saying, in context, and we may have missed it.
Okay, did you have notes or was it
No, I
all?
didn't. I'm so sorry, as they would have been included because it was just me talking about what I've been doing recently. So I genuinely didn't have them, but I can't remember what I said completely now. If I can help in any way with backfilling, I mean, I will, but I know I genuinely didn't. I was in the conference. I went into a separate room in the hotel and, just spoke from the heart, really, on what's been going on.
I'm very grateful. The problem is that because you faded in and out throughout the
Yeah.
thing, there were certain things
Signal was
that,
terrible.
we could, so for example, what you're doing with MOJ was quite interesting, but then you were, we had a big gap.
I think in future, Chair, I will make sure, if I can, that I can be there. That was a conference I was hosting with a couple of hundred people, and it's been in my diary for 6 months. So when your date came in, I mean, I had to leave a conference that I was hosting to go off and do your bit. Even that was probably not that gracious of me to the people that had come, but, someone else was speaking, so it was fine. But in future, I will try and be there in person so we don't have those signal issues.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, then given the debate which they had, I'll formally propose the recommendation as per the paper, and I think we treat it as a trial for the remainder of the municipal year and then review it in probably the annual meeting and decide whether it then carries on as is. Matthew.
So thank you, Chair. Can we make a point to minute that we will review this after 6-8 months?
So, yeah, I think that would be a good idea. That'll form part of the recommendation. So with that addition, is that agreed? Okay, thank you very much. And then that... Okay, all right, just stepping back one item to the Police and Crime Commissioner's annual report, as she heads out the door, but it won't affect her. It is a statutory requirement that we do let the Commissioner have a report on our review of and recommendations on the report. So if you're happy, that still will be done. There's not going to be a lot in it because it's what you've already discussed already. So that will be submitted in consultation with me if that's agreed, but that's apparently covered under the Act. Okay, right. We've now moved to item 10, which is the independent co-opted member recruitment, and you're aware, as I said in my opening remarks, that there is a vacancy already, which was from the position vacated by Dave Stewart, and there is Shirley's term, as Dave's would have done, comes to an end at the end of the municipal year as well. So we do need to, it's felt to be a good idea to recruit 2 members, one of whom will take immediate effect, so that will likely be in January, and then one which will come into effect from the AGM in 2024. Then both of those will run through to the AGM in 2028 because it's in line with the election cycle for the Police and Crime Commissioner. So the recommendation is that we appoint a cross-party task and finish group in accordance with our terms of reference, and that then recommendations will be made for the panel at its meeting in January. So yeah, we can do this, I guess, in all sorts of complicated ways. We could look at proportionality, but we probably need quite a large group to truly reflect proportionality, given that I think it goes something like 8 Conservatives, 6 Liberals and a couple of Labour. So maybe the simplest thing would be to have a Conservative, a Liberal Democrat and a Labour Party member, if people are happy with that. And we do need to decide who they are now. So I will be the Conservative member. Matt, were you happy to do the Labour?
Yeah, I'll be happy to do
one
that.
here. Okay. Vivian, or do you have someone else?
I'm happy to do the Lib Dem if nobody else is interested.
Okay. So can we agree that those 3 members are appointed?
Who was the Conservative? Sorry, I didn't hear who the Conservative.
Me.
Oh.
Okay, so that panel then, we will meet, we will consider applications, suitable advertising will be done through contacts through all of our local authorities and wider, and see what we come up with, and then 2 candidates will be recommended to the panel for its next meeting. I think we're almost there anyway. And so is that all agreed?
Sean, can I just ask one question? Sorry, Chair. Does the independent member have a kind of almost a step up if they've been on and served extremely well? Would they get sort of a bit more elevated?
I don't believe so. I think it's rather like when you stand for re-election. If you've been there 38 years or 3 months or whatever it is, I don't think you're treated any differently.
No, it's just because
the panel.
I think it's slightly independent. It's slightly different for an independent when they give up their time free to come and sit on these panels. It's just, to me, if they've worked really well and they've put the effort on it, it's such a shame. Just if somebody on interview day actually, performs better, because we've had it so many times that somebody on an interview, when you get a new member of staff, somebody on an interview comes in, interviews really well, you get them in the job, and it's like, oh my God, what have I done? So it's just, to me, if we've got the experience of somebody being on a panel that's done really well, whether you would keep them on just because you've got that as well. So that was why I thought I'd ask.
I guess the reality is, and with our legal advisor here, I haven't even introduced Peter's deputy, Helen, whether you might like to comment on it. I'm guessing that we need to take every candidate on their merits and then make recommendations. But
absolutely. In terms of the position regarding the independent member, that would be the idea of the group is that they look at all of the candidates, and the idea would be that they would choose the best candidate. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you should be looking at one particular person, even though they've got a wealth of experience. They do need to be treated absolutely the same.
Hopefully that's helpful. All right, so if that's agreed, then the next item is item 11, which is legal support to the panel. The contract which we have at the moment is coming to an end and does need to be renewed, which means somehow or other we need to find, to be able to fulfil that role, there'll be some sort of invitation for organisations to tender to that. So what we're being asked to do is to note the review of legal support arrangements, which the Democratic Services Officer will be leading. We need to appoint a member to support that process. I'm thinking chairman is probably the most reasonable to do that, to be able to represent the panel, and the report will come back confirming the outcome of that procurement process to our next meeting. So you're happy with that as the way forward? Okay, thank you. And then the last item is item 12, which is the panel's work programme. To see whether it's at proposed recommendation is at page 49. See whether members have got any questions, or if you're happy to agree the work programme. Are you agreeing, or are you asking to speak?
Sorry, Chair, thank you. Yeah, thank you for the work programme as it's outlined. I do wonder whether it fits in this work programme or within the new meetings that you're suggesting that we have, that we maybe invite the Association for Police and Crime panels to come and address us around how we currently operate as a panel and how we work with the PCC, just so that we can get some outside engagement and advice. And maybe that could be a theme for some of the other work that we look to do.
Thank you. If members agree, I think that'd be really useful. And that was my motivation in sending out the LGA review and best practice as well. So yeah, sounds a good idea. Everyone agrees. Okay, anyone else? Any points? Then is that agreed? Yeah, thank you. Okay, I'll close the meeting. Sorry, we're 5 minutes over when I wanted, but thank you very much. I think we've covered a lot.